Guys, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Unleash Your Inner Greatness. Today's guest is a really inspiring guest, and I'm really excited to have him on the show. Michael Johnson is the CEO and the founder of the Mojo Master brand and the Academy of Mind and Motivation. Michael is one of the elite transformation and success coaches in Australia who works with high achievers, athletes and entrepreneurs. As a speaker and personal development trainer, Michael helps people build confidence, self-belief and success through the science of achievement and practical psychology. Michael's world-renowned personal development events such as Thrive Time, the Accelerator and Everest are super inspiring events which positively change lives and help people to unlock limiting beliefs and create a life by design. Michael is one of the most charismatic, energetic and motivated individuals that I know, and I'm super excited to introduce you to Michael Johnson, the Mojo Master. Michael, welcome to the show.
Well, I need to take you, or I need to record that first part and just put it on my phone every day so that when I wake up I hear that. Sounds pretty impressive.
You are. It's the least I could do. Mate, thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Before we dive in, I just wanted to ground you in a great place, and I was just wondering if you could share with us maybe 3 things that you're most grateful for in your life right now.
Coffee, because it's 5:30 over here in the morning, so coffee I'm pumped with.
You are getting up early, mate. Thanks very much. I appreciate it. It's 7 o'clock here in London time, so thanks for jumping on. So 3 things that you're grateful for right now. And what was the highlight of 2018?
Cool. There are 2 good questions that I never get asked. Look, I'm just grateful for the experience that we get, that we call a life. And life can be fun, but it can also be challenging. Life can be exciting and extremely rewarding, but it can also be extremely challenging and stressful and frustrating and all those things. But I think I just love the roller coaster of life. I think, there's way too many people out in the world at the moment who are preaching, that we've got to be happy all the time. We've got to be excited. We've got to, I think it creates way too much of a delusion or a fantasy. Like if you actually look up the etymology of delusion or fantasy, it's convincing ourselves of something that doesn't actually exist. And I think that the idea of happiness actually doesn't exist. We can't be happy all the time. We have to have this thing called an experience, and the experience has, depending on our perceptions, like some people could be having the worst day, and to someone else, that's someone else's idea of the greatest day ever. It all depends. So I'm just grateful that I get to have this awesome experience that we call life, and take on the challenges and have that roller coaster and have, the craziness, I guess, that is life. So I guess that's what I'm grateful for, and that includes everything in it, from the amazing conversations to the not so amazing ones, to the great friendships to the not so great ones, and so on. I think everything counterbalances itself. It's the old Chinese philosophy of yin and yang, that philosophy goes, the idea of duality goes right through, I think, most cultures for tens of thousands of years, or as long as almost human existence. And when you look at it, I think everything is always trying to counterbalance itself. I won't get into the science of all that stuff, because there's a lot of science there from a whole bunch of different fields, from cosmology to quantum theory and everything right through. But it just seems that, we live in this remodeling, and this is actually a huge challenge in cosmology at the moment. It's starting to look like that the universe could be a remodeling universe, and that the Big Bang Theory is partially true, but it could also be partially incorrect, where it's something that's remodeling itself and it's consistently remodeled itself. And there's a potential that it could be infinite, an infinite remodeling, which never had a start and never had a finish. Now that's, a mindfuck in itself. But, I think life is just, we're consistently trying to remodel. Like we're trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work, and what worked yesterday may not work today, even if we tried again. It's just remodeling, and we're consistently growing and learning and adapting and changing. So yeah, I guess I'm grateful for that experience, and everything in it. So that answers all 3 questions at once. 2018, I think 2018 for us was an amazing year as a company and also for myself. The thing I'm most grateful for is I actually got married in 2018. So last year in September to Jess, who you've met. So she's been on the journey with me since I was crazy enough to leave a lucrative career as a personal trainer. And when I was, making really good money and, I built a really successful business. And one day I just rocked up and said, can't do this anymore. I'm out of here, and packed up my shit and left. And, I told my mum and she burst into tears and said, what are you doing with your life? And she said that as well when I was a diesel mechanic and left that industry at the start of the mining boom here in Australia. Both times she burst into tears and said, what are you doing with your life? But every time I've just been rewarded more and more for having that leap of faith, but I just knew that it wasn't the right thing to do. Jess was there at the start and although I think for about 2 years she almost cried every night when I had no money and was struggling and could hardly even afford to eat and everything like that. When I started this company, it was pretty amazing to spend time with her and to have some time off. And that's the thing that I was grateful for, but also the massive challenges that we had as well with having a really fast growth company that lacked systems and processes and structure with staff. And it was last year was a bit of chaos,
yeah,
but it was great.
And we were speaking about that just before we kicked off the official recording of the show. And it's interesting. It puts into perspective because, like I said at the start of the show, you're probably one of the most positive guys that I know. And that's just being honest. But then you gave me perspective about the real life and how last year truly was. So what was your biggest challenge last year? If there was a specific time, one time where you felt maybe you wanted to give it all away, or what was
that was every day. No, you know what I think it is. It's sort of like we live in a world at the moment, which maybe we always have. I'm not sure, but because of, I really like the idea of duality because when you look at it in nature, there's a lot of studies that are showing that electromagnetism plays a massive role in almost everything that happens. Now, there's more and more studies that are coming out in cosmology that are showing that maybe the universe or even planetary structures might be organized in a way based on electromagnetism. Now, they're only just starting to explore that model at the moment, but it looks like if you have a look at the spiral structures and stuff of galaxies and so on, there's an arrangement there, but they're not really too sure how that works or why it works, and electromagnetism could be that way. But our cells in our body and the way that humans function, it seems to be a pattern of electromagnetism. Our nervous system works on electromagnetism to an extent as well. But so it seems to play a big role. Now, when you break down, you look at all different sciences, there seems to be a bit of a gap because if you go down into mathematics, in order for a equation to balance itself out, it needs to be balanced on both sides. So the word equals means to balance, to have both sides that are the same. They add up to the same thing. Now, when you go right up the scale of all different sciences, even if you look at chemistry, an ionized state or an ionized atom which has a positive charge will attract something with a negative charge or try to fill out its outer layers until it's neutral. Now, what if we're not all trying to be positive? What about if we're trying to neutralize ourselves to create some form of balance? Now, human psychology and fields of social science, they'll say things like you can be positive without being negative. You can be happy without having the opposite side. I don't believe in that model. I don't believe in it at all because I watch and I've dealt with tens of thousands of people. If you're hyperactive, you will crash. If you exert too much energy today and you're too excited and elated and woo, then you're going to crash. And I see that motivation event after motivation event around the world where people go and they're like, yes, I'm going to take on the world and I'm going to be a millionaire and I'm going to have the perfect body and I'm going to do everything. And 3 weeks later, they're like, I can't even be fucked getting out of bed. So when you look at that, maybe the model, the whole model or the whole infrastructure that's been based around human psychology is actually based on an incorrect model. Maybe. There are definitely parts of it that I think are fantastic, but there's also parts of it that do not work. And when you look at, I think I spoke about this before, that if you look at the idea around positive thinking and the amount of stuff with positive posting and and all these motivational quotes. Like I never remember a time in my life where I've been surrounded by so much positive thinking, motivational quotes. Like I hop on Instagram, motivational quote, motivational quote, motivational quote. You know, I get told by people like, you just need to be positive all the time. And when I look at it, depression rates in this country are soaring. They're through the roof. Suicide rates through the roof. Anxiety rates through the roof. So we've got more and more of this positive stuff, yet at the same time, we've got mental disorders that are going through the roof. You've got to question yourself. And I'm not saying that I'm right, but I'm not saying that I'm wrong. I'm just saying that I'm open to question it, which is what I think any intelligent person does, is that they question things. And my question is this stuff really helping us to live a greater life, or is it actually causing the polar opposite to happen, where in a day and age where we're surrounded by so much positivity, this is just maybe we look at other people's lives and go, they've got all their shit together, they're doing so great, and I'm not. And maybe that's the reason why so many people are depressed, suicidal, you know, all of that stuff. But then you get into fields of biology and they say, well, there's a biological imbalance. But then if you look at neuroscience and you look at fields like that, there is a depending on where you look on the scale of the way that things happen, the brain, my belief is that we have experiences in that moment we have to create a perception for. You know, just as a bit of a head fuck or a mind fuck, when you look at it, the eyes only take in light. So if the eyes only take in light, what you perceive you see isn't actually what you see. Your brain, it's your brain's interpretation of light that then you tell yourself, that's what I saw. And so I've had people who come to my events consistently and they'll say things like, oh, I know what I saw. And then you start questioning it and you go, okay, just stop, go back into an exact moment, a specific moment. Don't generalize it, because a lot of people generalize it. You know, when you say things like, they do it all the time, that's a generalization. Today was a bad day. That's a generalization. You've generalized millions upon millions of processes and thoughts and information coming into your head throughout that whole day, maybe billions, maybe even trillions. And you've generalized it into just, it was a bad day. That's completely incorrect data. To me, that's like walking into a library, grinding up every book that you can possibly find and pulling out one piece of the ground up books, the thousands of books, and saying whatever's on that bit of paper is correct. And that relates to everything. It's just, it's so incomplete. Yet as humans, we don't have time to sit there and to go through every single thought and to question it and to become consciously aware of it. But what can happen is, you know, I've seen people come to our events with huge traumas, and I don't work in this stuff at all. Like, I'm a high performance coach. So my goal is to help people to kick ass in life. That's it. I believe that if you're kicking ass in your life, you're not depressed, because when I'm winning in life, I don't feel depressed. I don't feel down. You know, I might not be happy, but I might not be sad. I just know that I'm grinding and I'm doing something pretty cool. I believe that if you can get a person into that state, the rest of life takes care of itself.
Wow.
Okay, so my goal is to just help people to figure out, what is it that you love to do? How can you consistently do it? Because if you consistently do it, you're going to take on challenges, you're going to take on problems, you're going to push yourself harder because you're going to be inspired to do it. But at the same time, there's going to be this drive to consistently want to do it. You know, I'll give you an example. Like, when I go on holidays, I open up my laptop and I'm always working. And so even when I was on my honeymoon, I said to Jess, look, you know, I don't care where we go. We went to the Maldives. And I said, I don't care where we go, but I just want to make sure there's internet access, because I will be working for 1 to 2 hours. And that's me. Now, here's the thing. Before I even got married, Jess knew who I was, and I laid it all out on the table. I didn't become someone I wasn't. I work. I love to work. You know, I work around people. I love human behavior. I work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because even when I'm not working, I'm still fucking working. My brain's still thinking. I'm trying to figure out how everything works. Like, it's what I'm born to do. Now, the crazy thing is, I go away somewhere, I open up my laptop and I start working, and people go, why are you working? You're on holiday. And I go, because I love this stuff. And they go, you're mad. But if I was an athlete, right? If I was an athlete and I'm training while I'm on holiday, they walk past and they go, man, you're dedicated. So you're dedicated if you're an athlete, but you're insane if you love to do what you do as a job, right? To me, it's craziness. And that's because most people in the population have never found what they love to do. So their whole goal in life is, I go to work to make money. Money is an avoidance mechanism to avoid pain. And therefore I spend all my money trying to avoid the pain that I've created by the poor decision that I've made to go into a job that I don't actually love, that I don't even like, that I might sort of like, that I could convince myself to do But then I spend all my money trying to get away from the life that I've created.
Yeah.
So then they spend all their money traveling, or they spend all their money on cars or clothes or all that shit. And then they go, oh man, I got no money. Fuck, I've got to go back to work. So then they go back to work and they struggle for 48 weeks of the year so they can have 4 weeks of the year that they actually get to enjoy, which they're actually escaping from. And what they try to do is they try to pull a roller door down over the life that they've created. And they go, it doesn't exist for 4 weeks. Woo! To me, that's just shit. Like, why do that? You know, every day for me is a holiday, but also when I'm on holiday, every day is work. So it's the same thing. Like, I just wanted to create a life where I could wake up every day and just go, right, today there's going to be challenges. There's going to be problems. There's going to be shit that frustrates me, but there's going to be stuff that I enjoy. There's things that I love to do. But I'm going to get up and I get to determine the way that I live today. I get to play the game. I go on holidays, I exercise. I wake up in the morning, I exercise. It's the same thing. I just do it in a different location. You know, I might do podcasts, or I might write a book, or I might write blogs or create video content while I'm on holidays, but I'll do that any other day. But also when I'm at work, I go and have coffee with some of the highest performers. Like, I've got clients who are almost tapping on $1 billion a year in company turnover in a private company. You know, I get to work with some pretty serious high-level people who hire me as a private coach. Go out and hang out and have coffee with them. You know, we'll talk crap just like everybody else. You know, it's really fascinating as well, because so I get so many people and they go, what's it like hanging out with high achievers? And it's like, well, right. So I've got a client who's 38 years of age and almost tapping on $1 billion in his property development company. And they're like, so what do you guys talk about? The same shit that any other 38-year-old guy talks about. Like, I'm 35, but he's 38. You know, we talk about cars. We talk about, like, you know, do you think you could jump a motorbike off of like a 10-story building into a swimming pool? You know, it's just crap. But they're just normal people. They're just normal people who want to be treated like normal people and enjoy life as well. They're the same as everybody else. So getting back to it, you know, coming back to the idea of balance, I try not to be positive, but I try not to be negative. Like, I'm just trying to figure out how to live the most awesome life that I can, because I believe that if I can do it in my own life, then I can go out and show other people how to do it. And I believe that we're at a point where we need a paradigm shift, because what we're doing at the moment isn't working. And we're getting more and more challenged, which is both a good and a bad thing, by things like social media, because you're getting consistent insights into people's lives. And some of those insights, like if you look at Instagram really is just a fantasy world. That's all it is. And if you understand that it's a fantasy world, then you've got to play the game based on the fantasy world. You know, like, I post shit, I got a supercar, so I post, you know, my supercar on there. But on a daily basis, like, I get asked, you know, is it great driving a supercar? Yeah, it is. But it's also, at the same time, it's a pain in the ass. You know, you can't park it anywhere because I worry about it all the time. But at the same time, it's also inspiring. Like, I drive it and I pull up somewhere and little kids come running up. You know, I'll be driving and kids stand on the side of the road and they wave. And it reminds me of when I used to be a kid, because I used to say to myself when I was a young kid, one day I'm going to have that car. Now I have that car. It's my job to inspire those young kids to go out there and do it. Now, sometimes the parents are great, because they'll come up and they go, oh, you know, they ask questions. And normally, if I've got time, I'll open the doors. I let the kids sit in the car. I let them take photos. I let the adults sit in the car as well, because they love it too. You know, it's a cool thing. But at the same time, I drive down the road. I get called a dickhead, an asshole, a drug dealer, a scammer, a knobhead. Like, you would not believe the amount of crap that you get when you're in a supercar, because you're different. And I'm 35 with a supercar. So, you know, I can't have done it through hard work and dedication and determination. I have to be doing something illegal, right? You know, I have to be a drug dealer, or I have to be like ripping people off, because that's the only way that most people believe that you can make it in the world. So, you know, you get both sides of everything. Yeah, it's a, I don't know, but we need a paradigm shift. You know, everything has a balance. It all comes back to, what do you love to do? And, you know, for me, when I was a young kid, I always loved cars and I've always loved supercars. So I bought myself one, but I've had other friends who go out and they buy supercars in order to impress others. And it's the dumbest decision that they ever make, because when they get called an asshole, a drug dealer, a knobhead, you will not believe the amount of crap that people come up with when you drive a supercar or when you stand out. The same as if you're a high achiever in any industry, right? High achievers stand out above the rest.
Yeah.
And if you're a 5%er, you're standing out amongst 95% of the population, probably even more. in this country, I think business failure rate after 5 years is like 95%. So if you've got a business that's been going for 5 years and you're turning over more than, and your business is still going after, 10 years, you're in the top 5% of businesses. Now, in saying that, those businesses that are still going, it's something ridiculous like 70% or something, like I'm just making up numbers off the top of my head, but it's a huge amount. 70% or 75% don't even make $1 million a year, which means that they're almost a self-employed person working in a job. They just have an ABN or a business number. That's it. So in order to be one of the businesses that have been going for 10 years plus make over $1 million, like you're in the top like 1.001% or whatever it is, right? It's crazy. So you start standing out, people are going to shoot for you because you're an easy target.
Yeah.
And especially in Australia, Australians are awesome at supporting people who are struggling. There is no doubt in my mind that we're awesome helping the strugglers. At the same time though, we love to watch people in our own country win, but at the same time, we don't want anyone to win too much because we want everyone to be balanced, right? We want everyone to be neutral. Yeah. So the tall poppy syndrome, right? You do well and people, when you're struggling, they're like, yeah, you go get it. You do awesome. And then you start winning. They're like, you piece of shit. Don't be doing too much. Like, don't make us question our own life. And something that John Demartini said to me, which was really profound. He said, if you look at certain cultures around the world, the cultures that thrive the most are those who support their highest achievers, because what that does is that when you look at someone else who is achieving at a high level, inspiration can come in different forms. Inspiration can come from criticism, because some people, you see someone else achieving at a high level, and the only way that you can deal with that is to criticize them in order to make yourself feel better. But when you do that, you actually lower your own standards. Now, if you support people who are achieving at a greater level and you go, man, they must have gone through some hard shit, and you understand that it's hard work, it's dedication, it's skill. You look at that person, you go, man, they must be almost bulletproof, but at the same time, they must have had the crap beaten out of them. Because of that, you have a different level of respect for that person. You'll probably go up, talk to them, ask them questions, and you'll raise your own standards in life. Now, that doesn't also mean, pedestal them, because I get people who come up to me as well who don't get it as well. And they come up and they go, oh man, you're so successful. You're doing everything great. Like, your life is fucking amazing. And I'm like, oh man, if only you knew, like, you do not know me. So either side, people who criticize me and just say, you're an asshole because you've got all this money and your life's easy and everything's great for you, you piece of crap. I look at those people and I go, look, you don't understand me, and I don't, like, that's your thing, not mine. So they lower their own standards by trying to make me feel crap about my thing, but I've dealt with that my whole life. So all it does is it gives me more inspiration to go out and push harder. So they think they're trying to bring me down, but at the same time, they're fueling up the rocket. Right? Idiots. But then, and if you look at the word idiot, it normally means someone who's dense or doesn't think properly. And then I get other people who come up and they tell me how great my life is and how amazing everything is and how easy my life must be. And in my head, I just go, you don't know me, you don't get me. And so what you'll find is that a lot of high performers who are achieving at any level, people who go up and they think that that person has everything figured out and that they've got a great life and everything, and you start pedestaling them, you over-exaggerate their abilities to get where they have, which then makes that person feel like you don't get them. Now, if that's the case, you don't want to hang out with people who don't get you, right? So it makes it harder to get in a circle of people like that. Whereas when you're neutral, like I've built some of the best relationships by understanding that in order to achieve, you have to go through hell, and you've got to keep going. So I met one of my clients is an investment banker, most awesome dude. And years ago when I met him, most people in South Australia knew who this guy was. And they all try and get in contact with him because he can make, up to $10 million plus of personal income a year, depending on, the deals and stuff that he does. So extremely successful, young, charismatic. He reminds me of Harvey Specter from Suits, if you've ever watched Suits. Just wears, great suits and looks after himself and all that. But at the same time, he's surrounded by people who either kiss his ass or people who put him down. Very few people ever understand him. So I go to these networking events, right? And people like that, they walk in and everyone wants a piece of them. And, all these people come up and tell him how great he's doing and how amazing he is and all this sort of stuff. But at the same time, he feels like, and I'm assuming this is how he feels, is that he's not understood. And so he doesn't trust them. Because if someone's like that, you go, what are they trying to get from me? Now, then there's other people who criticize him. He's been in the paper. The newspaper writes articles about him that are not true, but then a month later they write articles about how great he's doing. And so he's on this emotional yo-yo of not knowing where his place is in society, right? Because all of us are looking to try and figure out where we're at in the game of life. There are people below us, but there's people above us. Where do I sort of sit in the scale? And that's why we look at other people and we judge. And the idea that we don't judge. I meet heaps of spiritual preachers who, this idea of like non-judgment, it's a great idea and it's a great fantasy. And yes, there are times where we have no judgment, especially in meditation. And if you use some of the processes that I've created in my events, you can get times of it, but you can't live it because judgment creates separation and separation creates understanding and learning and growth. We have to separate ourselves from others in order to understand ourselves. So we have to do it. Human psychology, you cannot not judge.
Wow.
So anyway, when you go back, it just depends. Some people have really harsh criticisms, but some people, like I might look and say, you're wearing a big headset. That's a judgment, but a judgment creates a separation. It says that we're different, but at the same time, it's not critical. Sometimes people walk past and they'll have a critical judgment, which also creates pain for the individual. But that pain is helping them to learn how to love and understand more. So everyone has to judge, and we all have times of critical judgment. I've not met a person, like I meet people who say things like, oh, that person's racist. In order to understand what a racist is, you have to be racist. You have to have times in your life where you have to understand what it's like to be that person in order to judge and criticize them to understand them. Now, there are plenty of people out there who say, well, I'm not like that. I would never do that. That's either because they're unintelligent and they're avoiding it, or number two, that they've gone through it, they've understood it, and they've learned the lesson from it, which then allows them to move forward. But at the same time, if it's causing emotional turmoil and pain and chaos, if you look at the word empathy, the original meaning of it, if you look at etymology, is to suffer with others. I was watching this piece yesterday, and by the way, just tell me to shut up if I talk too much because I get excited.
No, please, mate. I'm never going to interrupt. It's awesome. We can learn so much just through your story, so go for it, mate.
Thank you. Well, the word empathy means to suffer with others. And yesterday I was watching this professor of psychology do a TED Talk, and it was fantastic. And what she was talking about was how in order to understand others, there's a difference between understanding and empathizing. But she didn't use the word empathy. She sort of went around it, but maybe that's because she didn't have the right vocabulary or the right understanding around what the word meant. And I think we all have that. But that's also the reason why I love studying etymology, because when you can figure out why the word was created, it actually gives greater insights into the way that human behavior works. So I'll give you an example. If you look up the original meaning of ego, the original meaning of ego means the true self. Now, Sigmund Freud spoke about that, but what happened was he was interpreted, and this is what happens with anyone who's intelligent, right? Is that the mass population is normally a little bit less educated than someone who is highly intelligent. And when I say highly intelligent, that they have a deep understanding of what they know. And so normally it gets interpreted by a limited or a lower level of understanding. And then because of that, it gets distorted. Social media is crazy with that, and the media do it as well. So they take something that's not the way that it was in the context, then it's blown out of proportion. And then most people share that stuff because it fits in with their own confirmation biases about what they believe, not what's intelligent around what they believe. And half of this, I would say that most things that most people believe don't even work. It's just most people keep trying to make it work because it's their belief system. So the true meaning of etymology is the true self. Now, Sigmund Freud was blown out of context, and it was turned into a term that means the over-exaggerated self. Now, they're two completely different things. My true self, I've spent my whole life trying to figure that out. Who am I? And I think we all do, right? We're all trying to figure it out. And it changes. So you start to figure it out, and then all of a sudden things shift, and you go, oh, I don't know again, I'm lost. So that's part of the journey that we have of life. Now, you look at the word ego, true self, then you look at the word personality. The word personality is who we believe we are. Now, when you look at the word persona means what we express or what we show to others. Now, what happens is when you understand those three things, I pieced it together and I shared this at our Thrive Time event, is that what happens is that you've got your true self on the inside, who you're trying to figure out, who am I really? But you've had all this stuff pushed onto you ever since you were a young kid, telling you how you should behave, how you should act. So you've actually lost yourself. And part of the process of life is losing yourself so that then you spend the rest of your life trying to find yourself again. It's part of the journey, right? So we have to have that stuff happen. Like, I have people who come to my events and they go, my parents fucked me up. Your parents didn't fuck you up. Your parents just did what your parents were trying to, what was helping them figure themselves out. But they had all this stuff as well.
Yeah.
It's our responsibility as an individual, as a human, to get out there and to figure out who we are. And anything that you don't learn, you'll pass on to your kids. Now, that creates a journey for them. Without that, there's no reason to exist. We have to have that in order to exist. So our parents don't ruin us. Our parents actually give us a journey, no matter what the circumstance is. Now, yes, I would love to go back and to create the perfect parent based on my idea around what life should be, but that's not their idea of what life should be. They're trying to figure it out as well. Yeah. So when you look at it, you've got the true self trying to figure out the true self trying to express yourself to the world. So your ego is trying to get you out to the world, but you've got a personality, which is who you believe you are based on your belief system and based on the external world that's been reinforced around you. But then at the same time, you create a mask to try and fit into that external world. So those three things are fighting against each other. The more that you can get your persona working with your personality and understanding what your ego really is, those three things, the more congruent life flows. The further you separate your personality from who you really are to your persona, the more chaos you have. And I've seen this happen, the more mental health issues and the more crazy your mind will be, because it's winding yourself up trying to figure everything out. And in the brain actually, from a lot of the research actually that I've been doing, is that the brain separates between the conscious and the unconscious mind, which is an idea. There actually is no conscious and unconscious mind. There's no such thing. It's an idea or a metaphor around an idea of how the brain, of how we understand things. So there is definitely part of our brain that is unconscious that we're unaware of. But really, there's our whole brain we're not really aware of. It just depends where we focus on things, depends on what we're conscious of. But that's not consciousness. They're different things. So every experience we have, our senses take in information, which then it has to decide what those things mean. Now, based on that meaning, our brain has to separate the experience from other experiences in order to understand it, which means that in any moment of time, our brain's actually separating charges or ideas. From a quantum level, we can call them charges. Now, I don't want to create like a fluffy sort of thing, but there's actually a lot of stuff coming out now around how microtubules work in the brain and so on. And it's a possibility that they're picking up quantum fluctuations and all this sort of stuff. But I'm not going to get into that. What we can see is that if we create a positive, if we call them positive and negative charges, every experience you have is creating a separation of an idea of a positive and a negative perception at any point in time. Like if I think about, say, coffee, when I touch that, in order to understand that that coffee is hot, I also have to have a past idea around what hot and cold means. So in order to be hot, I have to understand at the same time what cold is. So my brain's going, what's hot, what's cold, and where does that perception fit into that scale somewhere? So the same thing happens with our day. I had a shit day. But the idea of a shit day is separating a charge and it's saying, okay, if we look at I'll call it a charge as being a negative experience, well, there's also a positive experience on that day. It's just one's unconscious and one's conscious. What we're consciously aware of is a crappy day, but that doesn't mean that the positive day or the good day wasn't there as well. It just means that that's what we're aware of. So when you go back in and you ask the right questions, you actually challenge that. You can bring it together and neutralize it, which then keeps you on your path, because all emotions distort intelligence. So when I hear the idea of emotional intelligence, they're two completely opposite things. Being intelligent isn't being emotional, and being emotional isn't intelligent. That's why if you look at a relationship, like with Jess and myself, when we're intelligent, we sit down and we go, hey, look, can we have a conversation? Yep. So you sit down, you have a conversation, go, look, yesterday you said this and it sort of, made me feel a little bit this way. And I'm just wondering, how do we work past that? That's an intelligent conversation. The other conversation is the emotional conversation, which is like, you did this, fuck you, no, fuck you. And everyone flies off the handle. Now that's the most unintelligent conversation, right? So our emotions distort intelligence. Now, what that's doing is it's creating a separation of charges in the brain, which then releases, or it creates firing and wiring of the circuits in the brain, which then release a chemical cascade into the body, which we call hormones, and it could be neuropeptides. There's a whole bunch of other neurochemicals and chemical messengers. But what they do is they trigger the cells to be excited or to hinder or to suppress themselves or to slow down. And it's those hormones that drive our actions and our behaviors. So on the scale of things, we create a perception. The perception drives the thought process. The thought process, based on its imbalances to whether we're creating positive charges or negative charges. And by the way, that's just what I call them. That's not the scientific explanation of them. Then triggers a cascade of chemicals, which then responsible, but then we create a behavior out of. Those behaviors then can reinforce the same thinking processes, which is why when you read most scientific articles around human behavior, depending on what the scientist is studying, depends on what their belief is around where that interaction's happening. So some scientists believe that the chemical cascade causes the behavior. So that's why you'll see things like, depression is a chemical imbalance. Well, yes, that's partially true, but that's because they're looking halfway down the scale of something that happened maybe 20 years ago that's now being reinforced in a cycle. And they've sort of stopped the cycle there and they're going, well, that's what happens. My question is why? Why is there a chemical imbalance in the first place? And some people just go, well, it's because it's the way that it is. It could be genetic. But then at the same time, those chemical messengers are telling the DNA how to shift, change, and adapt based on the environment, which we call epigenetics. So then, is it the genetics or has it come from a past perception? My belief is that perceptions are everything. Like if you get rid of human perception, you don't actually have anything. Like if I take away your eyes, your ears, your ability to taste and smell, and that information coming into the brain, which is creating those perceptions in the first place, you have nothing. You don't even know that you exist. And you don't even know that the world exists. So my belief is that perceptions are actually the trigger for almost everything that we experience, whether that's imbalances chemically, whether that's imbalances within the brain. So I've had plenty of people who come to me and they say, depression is a neurological imbalance in the brain. That may be the case. And it could be because, maybe you dropped on your head at birth and it caused brain damage. Or it could be because you were born with a part of the brain missing. But if you look at lots of different studies in neuroplasticity, there have been people born without half of their brain that still are fully functioning. And they actually have their brain has adapted to take on the traits of that part of the brain. So there are people who are born without, say, the right side of the brain, which is supposedly known for creativity, yet those people are still highly creative. So explain that. Wow. And that's where science is sort of has lost it a little bit. Because the cool thing is, right, is that great fields of science study in depth about one topic. But in order to do a good scientific study, you need to break it away from everything else. And you need to really refine what you're trying to study. So some scientists get way in depth into understanding one thing, but they don't understand how it fits into the billions of other things. And so because of that, it can look really, really simple to that one field of science, but it doesn't make sense when you fit it into the jigsaw puzzle. So there's always going to be debates between people who are more philosophical and theorists versus those who are more mechanics, or, if you look at quantum theory versus quantum mechanics, the theorists are the whack jobs that think about like crazy overarching ideas and all this stuff, but they're the ones who help the science progress because they come up with whacked out ideas that they've got to go and test. But then you need the quantum mechanics people to go out there and test it and to study it and to really understand it in depth. And so they both fight and work together, off and on, and they push and pull in order to progress science. And the same thing happens with fields of science and philosophy. Without philosophy, you don't have science, but without science, you don't have philosophy. So those two things need to work together in order to progress science. But what you'll find is a lot of people who love like full-on hardcore scientific science that are really, they're looking at in-depth studies. Those people sometimes can criticize the philosophical people and say, well, science is just science and everything has to be researched or else it's crap. But at the same time, science doesn't progress without those philosophical people, because they've got to come up with the ideas and think crazy in order to go and test something. And that's the only way science progresses. And that's why I think the greatest scientists, like if you look at Einstein, he said today's facts are tomorrow's fiction, because what we believe to be true today isn't true when we challenge those ideas. And so really science is just shifting and changing paradigms in the way that we think. That's all that it is. We're just coming up with better models and better models and better models. But that might be that we might never ever find the answers. You know, it's just consistently we're evolving those ideas, and that's all that it is. And that's what I believe evolution is. Evolution is just a consistent continuum of information evolving. That's all that it is.
Mate, you so I actually did a bit of research, and because depression is flavor of the month, you know, it's in the news. It's a serious topic.
Yeah.
And if I'm completely honest with you, I was introduced to you because I was going through a really tough time after I lost my marriage, and I come to your course, Life by Design. Mate, could you take us back to your journey, because you've come such a long way. You know, you mentioned that you used to be a diesel mechanic, and I'm sure that you weren't talking this way in the workshop. You know, all those years ago, and then you were PT. So I want to throw it over to you. Could you sort of tell the listeners a little bit about, you know, how you got to where you are now? Like, what's your journey been?
I'll try and keep it short because I tend to talk a little bit. Look, I guess if you go back, the challenges in my life started pretty much from birth. My mum was 17, raised in a Catholic family, and fell pregnant with me to my bogan atheist dad, who they're blue collar, dad's side of the family blue collar, mum a white collar, and so there were challenges there. But you know, at the same time, my parents worked really hard to try and create a better life for themselves, which was fantastic. Like, their work ethic is part of the reason why I work my ass off as well, because it's what I know from watching them. And that's because I think they believed in themselves that they were going to create a greater life, and the circumstance of having a child at 17 years of age didn't become the excuse of not being able to have what they want in life. So I think that caused a lot of problems. Like, I think there was a lot of frustration there, especially from my mum, and maybe there was some resentment there and so on. So, you know, I was challenged at home quite a lot growing up. I was always in trouble at school as well, because I used to question everything, as I still do. Like, I think that's what makes my life unique and great to myself. But at the same time, it also causes a lot of chaos because I question everything. But it also pushes me to find more in-depth understandings. Like, I don't just take things on face value, even science. I want to explore. So I used to do that quite a lot at school, and I spent a lot of time just sitting outside the classroom questioning, you know, why is the sky blue? Why is it that birds fly? You know, I remember asking questions like that because I was always really interested in just why things work. And I still do to this exact day. And I think from there, you know, my mum especially, but my parents together, I think my mum always wanted to go to university because her brothers and sisters all went to university. She had one sister and two brothers. They all went to university. My grandfather as well. I think that was part of his pattern because his dad died when he was 13. So he ended up quitting school and going and getting a job, and became very successful in what he did. And so I think that pattern, and if you study family dynamics, you'll see that there's consistent patterns. So I think that my grandfather's pattern was that he always wanted to go to university. So he pushed his kids to go to university and do well at school. But then my mum fell pregnant with me at 17, and she had that same trait, that same pattern. And so I think it caused a lot of chaos for my mum, me getting in trouble at school all the time. And so I was in trouble at home. I'm in trouble at school. I didn't really fit in either with, you know, the cool kids at school or anything like that. I used to be friendly with everybody, but I just didn't fit in. My parents used to go away quite a lot. We used to go to parties and things like that. Like, I remember going to parties and, you know, we would sleep in the car or something like that while they were in at parties. Like, I had a great younger life because I saw a lot of human behavior, you know, adults who were intoxicated and things like that. And I was never unsafe, that's for sure. But it was just, you know, I was always around that sort of stuff. And I think that I wanted to be good at school, but I just couldn't. It wasn't my thing. And so, getting in trouble all the time at school just made me get in trouble at home a lot. Then, I'd go to school and try and fit in with the other kids, but I was this red-headed, pasty-skinned, freckly kid that was chubby. And so that made me, I think, an easy target to be picked on. But at the same time as well, I learned how to fight because I realized that if you bash the kid that's giving you shit, then after a while you stop getting picked on, which gets rid of the pain. And so, I guess I could say that I was bullied, but at the same time, I bullied those kids who bullied me just as much. That caused a lot of issues as well because I used to get in trouble quite a lot for fighting. And at 15, I got expelled from school. And I got to a point of sneaking out to the kitchen one night and grabbing the sharpest kitchen knife that we had. And I thought, that's it, I'm done. Like, I'm going to end life. And I sat there crying for probably a good hour or so, just thinking, why is my life so fucked up? And I guess the questions that you ask yourself really determine how you think about life. And that has to do with the charges in the brain as well. Part of the reason why I love the model that we've come up with. And also, I think Dr. John Demartini has helped me quite a lot with this model as well. He's a good friend of mine. Is that when the brain creates charges or these separation ionized states in the brain, what can happen is that your brain goes and goes on a quest for the ionized state, the opposing ion. And so your brain will be full of lots of questions. And if you ask good questions, normally you'll find good answers. But if you ask poorly quality questions, you may not even know are poor quality at the time. They just are questions that keep popping into your mind. If you don't catch them and become aware of them, you can cycle. And so I used to just ask myself, why is my life so shit? Why don't I fit in? Why am I always in trouble? And it just kept coming back with all these bad answers. And I only had one really close friend at the time, apart from my sister. And I just felt like I didn't fit in. So I was ready to end it all. And that night I ended up just flipping out. Like, I got really angry with myself and just thought, how is it that I've let other people, make me feel this way? And I remember throwing the kitchen knife so hard, it cut my blinds. And it was a really cool moment because the blinds that I had just like almost opened and I could just see the street light shining in. And I just remember in my head saying, you know what, I will never, ever, ever let someone determine how I'm going to live again. And that was like a light bulb moment for me. And I think sometimes you've got to get to that point in life to really understand yourself. And I know lots of people go through, a lot of people attend our events, even though we don't advertise for those sort of people to come along. I know that everyone goes through those stages. It just depends on what you do with it and how you deal with it. So that happened. I went back to school after being expelled. I went back to another school. I started fitting in with a different group of kids. I still didn't feel like I fitted in perfectly, but it was better than what it was. Finished grade 12, didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. There was part of me that wanted to be a fighter pilot, but I wasn't good at mathematics and I wasn't good at physics. But I did love science. So I was quite good at biology and fairly good at geography. But there was no way I was going to be a fighter pilot. And I think maybe I had a bit of a fantasy from watching Top Gun too many times. I thought it would be pretty cool to just fly fighter jets. Not that I could get killed. That didn't enter my mind. I also wanted to do marine biology as well. But I went up and worked on an aquaculture farm and realized that it sucked. And I just came out and I became a diesel mechanic because I could see that technology was moving with mining and all that sort of stuff. And I was really, really interested in how things work. What I didn't realize at the time, though, was my love for things is figuring out how humans work and human behavior. So I got into being a diesel mechanic. The mining boom started in South Australia. I was thinking, I'm going to make all this money. I'm going to own houses, get to travel the world. I'm going to get married, have kids, do all the stuff that I got told was that's how you live life. But then when I got there, after about the second year, I hated it. I hated it because every day, I think almost every mechanic came in and just hated life. They would complain about how crap the company was. They complain about how crap the job was. Every day it was a shitty job. For me, I hated it. You climb under a truck that had just driven, a couple of 1,000 kilometers that was hot and it hit a kangaroo 20 kilometers before it came to Adelaide, which was still half stuck underneath the truck, which had baked on. It was covered in dirt and grime. You sit under there and, it stinks and you touch something and all this dirt falls on your face and it's all full of oil so they can't get that shit out of your skin for weeks. I just hated it. And then, here we have 45-degree summers and you're lying underneath a 100-degree engine, truck that stinks and is covered in dirt. and you're in overalls because you're not be in overalls because you just get covered in everything. And I used to just sit there thinking, fuck this, like this is not what I want to do. And I just remember one day sitting in the lunchroom and I just listening to all the mechanics complain about how shit the company was and how crap they weren't getting paid enough, yet they were on ridiculous amounts of money compared to the average person. Yeah, isn't it interesting that people complain that they don't make enough money when they don't do what they love, because they tend to spend all their money doing stuff that gets them away from the thing that they hate doing, which is work, but then they've got to go back to work to make money to get away from it.
Yeah.
So they were in this cycle, and I was questioning everything again, and I thought, I can't do this. Like, I don't want to be here. I started feeling those feelings I had when I was 15 and just prior to that with a kitchen knife. So I thought, I don't want to do this. Anyway, I remember one night flicking through the newspaper on my bed, and I saw this advertisement for personal training. And the gym was the only place that ever made me feel good. It was the only place, even when I was 15, I started training when I was 13, but that's because I hated myself. I was fat. I felt disgusting myself. I did a video on my Facebook page the other day talking about how sometimes for a lot of people, they let their insecurities define them as a person instead of letting their insecurities drive them. And I think at around about 13, I realized that I had an insecurity around my body image, around the way that I felt about myself. And so I went to the gym, I started exercising. And I think that that's been one of my biggest drivers is my insecurities. I'd never get rid of them. I'm still insecure about my body image. I start eating shit food for a couple of days and I'm like, I feel disgusting. I don't want to feel like this anymore. I start noticing that I start putting on weight. Now, other people go, you look great. But to me, it makes me feel insecure. So because of that, I go back to the gym and I exercise, and that makes me feel great about myself. So we can use our insecurities to drive us, or we can allow our insecurities to define us. And I think most people in society let their insecurities define them, not drive them. So anyway, I thought, I would love to work in the gym. The personal trainers that I knew seemed to be great. The guys at the gym, like, you don't go to the gym and complain about how shit life is. You tend to go to the gym and talk about, all these different life experiences, or that's what I found anyway. So I started studying after hours, and for a kid that was put into special classes when I was younger through school, and for a kid that was told that they had dyslexia and learning difficulties, it was pretty cool to do something that I loved because I was actually really good at it. I started reading books. They would give us like the curriculum for 3 months of our personal training course, and I would read the whole thing in a weekend and then start like circling stuff that I didn't know and then going and studying it. I went, shit, I'm actually good at this. And I was a straight A student. And what I found is that learning difficulties are a byproduct of not loving what you do or not understanding how it fits into what you do. There's no such thing as a learning difficulty. I've worked with kids who have learning difficulties and they are very good at a few specific things. They're just not good at the things that they're being taught. They can't see how it helps them. Justin, who is one of my head coaches who I work with or who works with us, his son was struggling at mathematics, and his son loved playing computer games, and the computer games had to do with blocks and building stuff. And so Justin sat down with his son and showed him how if he understands mathematics and numbers better, it actually helps him play the game better because he understands where all the numbers fit in. And once he did that, his son became a straight A student.
Wow. Because
his son understood how it fits his values and how it helps him to do what he loves. So learning difficulties, I have learning difficulties. There's shit that I do not remember. Jess tells me stuff all the time and I forget it like almost instantaneously. I think men have this wicked filter for remembering very small amounts of information that suits them and forgetting the rest. It's almost like instantaneously. Really, when you look at it, kids with learning difficulties, it's just because they can't perceive that what they're learning is important to them and their highest values. When you understand their values and you can help them to understand how whatever they're learning helps them with their values, they actually don't have learning difficulties anymore. It all depends, and adults are exactly the same. I go into companies and I talk about learning difficulties, and for people wanting to remember more stuff, just attach it to your highest values and you'll remember it easier. That's why I remember like really crazy data, because I know that it helps me with human behavior. Like I remember research articles about cosmology, quantum theory, which that stuff doesn't make any sense in human behavior, but I remember it because I can understand how it starts to link into things, which sounds crazy to a lot of people, but it's just that's what helps us remember. Anyway, so I started doing that, became almost a straight A student of studying after hours in personal training. And then I ended up getting signed off my apprenticeship a year early. And I just remember walking to the boss's office and I said, I can't do this. And he said, what do you mean you can't do this? And I said, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be here. And he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know, but it is not this. And he said, Michael, don't end up like the rest of these fuckers. Go do what you love. Now, this is a multi-millionaire trucking tycoon. They were his departing words as I put my toolbox in the car. Then I drove to my mum's house, said, I quit. And my mum burst into tears and she said, what are you going to do with your life? And, if you just stick at it for 10 years, you'll be set. And I thought, in my head, if I do this for 10 years, I'll kill myself in 5. No way am I doing this. I think that it's funny how our friends and family and people around us have the best intentions to give us advice. But most of the time, the advice that people give us isn't based on what makes us the best. It's what they feel helps them live the best life. Now, they might not even be living the best life. Their life might be shit, but they'll still give you advice based on what they perceive is the best information that they know based on their limited understanding around what they know. So we've got to be really careful with how we refine information. Like I in my events and even with my one-on-one clients, I will never ever tell my clients what to do. What I do is I ask the right questions and I dig deep. I start to teach them things in metaphors, or I'll show them research or so on, so that then they make the best decision that's congruent for them. There's nothing worse than being told what we should and shouldn't do with a person who has a lack of understanding around what we love to do in life. And that's, I think that's, a massive challenge for a lot of people as well. Even in our industry, like personal development, you get told what you should and shouldn't do. There's benefits and drawbacks to everything. Like I think being ignorant has massive benefits, but it also has massive drawbacks. There are definitely times where I go, I would love to understand way less about human behavior because I see way too much stuff now based on my understanding that my head just doesn't stop. I would love to just be ignorant and just drink beer all the time and not give a fuck about most things. Like I would love to do that, but my brain doesn't work that way. So, but there's also benefits and drawbacks to having more intelligence. So you get both. So anyway, I as a personal trainer, I just love doing it. And I started realizing that I love to help people. And that became part of my purpose in life that drove me, was that I loved helping others. But I hadn't really refined that. And there were parts of it that I didn't enjoy and so on. So I just kept asking questions and learning. Then I found out that there were a whole bunch of clients who were coming in who had injuries and I didn't really understand rehab. So I started working with a lot of physios and chiropractors and different health professionals. Then from there, I started running some courses on the side to help personal trainers to integrate into the medical industry or do more work with better allied healthcare, which back in those days, it wasn't around. Like these days, it's everywhere over social media. But back in my day, there wasn't anything like that. So I just created it. Then I went and studied kinesiology through the Czech Institute and also nutrition. Then eventually one day after I think about 7 or 8 years in personal training, I'd won heaps of awards and I used to go out and train other trainers and all that sort of stuff and work with other gyms. I just got to a point where I went, this isn't for me. And I ended up leaving and I went and worked at a medical center for 2 years. And while I was there, it was awesome. I learned heaps, but at the same time, I could see that the nutritionist hated the naturopath hated the nutritionist, the physios hated the chiros hated physios, doctors hated everybody. Now that's not always the case, but it just seemed to be a pattern. And I went, this is shit. The same patients are sitting there every day while these idiots criticize each other instead of working on the best patient outcomes. And instead of the chiro and the physio getting together and going, what are you doing that's working? What are you doing that's not working? And let's figure this stuff out. And and working together. It was like they were almost trying to prove each other wrong. But at the same time, they would say, they're not getting good results with their clients, but they would have the same patients waiting outside their waiting, list for years. And that shitted me off. So eventually I got to a point where I thought, you know what, I think I'm done here. And after about 3 years of working in a medical center where I owned a studio down there, where I used to do a lot of rehabilitation and high performance training and personal training, and I was working with athletes and so on as well, I just thought, it's time to go out and start to educate around how the brain works. And I'd also studied NLP and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. And I was working with a psychologist and trying to understand what they were doing as well. I've just always been fascinated with ideas that work. And I think all industries have great ideas that work, and some industries have bigger gaps than others. And I just like to be that person who figures it all out and pieces the jigsaw puzzle together in order to get greater outcomes. But I realized at that point in time that, especially with health, most people know what to do. They just don't do it. Like, it's not that hard to exercise, to move on a daily basis, and to eat what we call fairly healthy. But then what happens, what I realize, is that most humans can convince themselves of anything. We can convince ourselves to do the most ridiculous shit that makes no sense, providing we can make sense out of it. And so, you get clients who would come in and they go, I want to lose weight. And you go, just eat clean and move more. Like, so simple, right? Drink water, breathe oxygen, make sure your breathing patterns are correct. Now, I used to get into like full advanced assessments where I'd be checking diaphragms and whether their breathing was correct because it can alter neck posture and a whole bunch of other stuff. Yet they would want to know the most complicated shit, but they couldn't even do the basics. And I found that most humans do exactly that. Like, someone will go on Instagram and they will buy a complicated advanced exercise routine to get the perfect delts, the perfect shoulders, the perfect back, but they haven't even created the habit of going to the gym. Now, it's more important to create the habit of going to the gym, because if you just go to the gym every day and you exercise in whatever form you want, there's going to be some form of benefit to doing that. Now, yes, you could have injuries and things like that. So, you want to probably hire someone who's qualified to help you to understand how to move properly. But at the same time, if you just create the habit of moving more and eating better over time, then you'll lose weight, right? It's not complicated. But humans tend to create the most complicated shit, because I think that as a society, most people enjoy failure more than they enjoy their actual success. Success scares the shit out of them. Because subconsciously, we get judged and criticized the more successful you are, because the more you stand out. And I think all humans deep down inside, especially in Western culture, know that, because they've spent their whole life criticizing others that achieve. And so there's a self-sabotage mechanism that they've created in their own head, because when they start seeing others achieve, they criticize them. And in their own head, they know that if they start achieving a greater level, they get criticized. And I know, after working with tens of thousands of people, that one of the main reasons for weight gain in a lot of people is it's a sabotage pattern to make them fit in or to reduce their ability to look good. Now, I've found that there has been a pattern of people doing this in relationships, because if they were attractive when they were younger, what can happen is they get a lot of attention from the opposite sex or the same sex, depending on, whether they're heterosexual or homosexual, whatever. And so they get a lot of attention, and then they get married and they start putting on weight really, really rapidly. But that's a protection mechanism to make sure that they don't get attention from other people.
Wow.
So it keeps them safe.
Wow.
I've seen this happen time and time again. And a lot of people, they'll go to the gym, they'll start exercising, but 2 weeks later, they've stopped going to the gym. And so they have 3 months off of the gym, 2 weeks going to the gym. But it's a natural self-sabotage pattern that they've created to make sure that they don't increase their standards in the way that they look. They're actually decreasing them to make sure that their relationship works.
I can guarantee you that people listening into the episode, there's just going to be like big revelations firing off left, right, and center from the start of the chat.
Can I just get onto this, because this is a game changer for me.
Yeah.
Humans only do things that they perceive has more benefits than drawbacks. Full stop. Almost every circumstance that I've come across has benefits and drawbacks. Every circumstance. And I've dealt with some crazy shit. I've only recently, someone called me out because I said I've dealt with almost every situation that I can possibly think of and dealt with them multiple times. I've been saying that for years. And only last year I had a guy who came into our events, and his brain was a bit different. Like, just the way that he would do things was just different. I was like, I can't figure this guy out. After him coming and doing 2 of our advanced courses, it ended up, I got talking to him and I just asked him the right questions, and he said, I grew up in a cult. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, I grew up in a cult. And I was like, I've never ever dealt with someone in a cult. This is a first. Like, normally I don't get thrown curveballs like that. But that's the first person who grew up in a cult that I've ever had to work with. And he'd had disassociation patterns where he was starting to act as an adult like a child again. But that's because as a child, he was forced to become an adult too quick. And so he hadn't lived out his childlike nature. And so as an adult, he started self-sabotaging his life, where he'd sold his business, he quit his business, just stopped working, just wanted to play basketball all the time and hang out with friends. And it was like he'd almost regressed back to a youngster. But it was because he was never able to do that because of the cult and the way that they behaved. And so he got to a point in his life where he went, I've got to go back and regress in order to learn what I need to learn. And so lucky I captured it. But now, after doing some work with him, he's shifted and gone back to the adult again, and now he's driving, he's got his business back again and all that stuff. But that was a curveball. But we get some like ridiculous cases that will blow your mind about some of the crazy shit that people have to deal with. But at the same time, I've had them over and over and over and over again. And, you know, most people feel like they're all alone because these bad circumstances only happen to them without realizing there's probably millions upon millions of people who have been through something almost exactly the same. And you just got to understand how to deal with it. And once you know how to deal with it, which doesn't mean to isolate yourself from it, it just means that, you know, you have to understand it better. But what I know is that if people don't move on from that stuff, it's because there's more benefits at that point in time than moving forward. So if someone's gaining weight and they can't figure out how to lose weight, it's because there's more benefits in them gaining weight than there is losing weight. The day that you can get more benefits to losing weight, you actually get into that habit. And all of our habits are created on an idea or a psychology that there are more benefits to doing what we're doing right now in that moment than drawbacks. And that's the same as feeling shit too. Like yesterday when I felt crap, and I think we spoke about this earlier, whether we were on the podcast or not, I can't remember. But yesterday when I said at the end of the day, I felt a bit shitty because just things didn't flow the way that I wanted them to. When I went back and I assessed it, I said, what are the benefits of that day? And what did I learn from it? I actually realized that there were so many stacked benefits into doing what I had to do. And it was just creating a small little kink in the road to push me on a different direction. But in my head, I was stuck in the paradigm that I need to go in that direction. And so that kink shot me in a different direction, which had better benefits. But at the time I couldn't see those benefits. I felt like I was off track when actually I was on track.
Most of the people that come to your event, what is it that like truly they are struggling with? In general, like is it anxiety? Is it they feel stuck? Are they going through a period of depression? What would you break it down to? Why are people drawn to your events? What are they seeking? What are they struggling with?
Look, I think there's different questions in there. One of them is like, why do they come to my events? Probably because I'm different and they've tried a lot of other things. Like I think we get a lot of people who come from the personal development, self-development space. And I think that they've tried jumping around and high-fiving strangers and hugging all different people and being hyperactive. But they still go through a lot of stages where they bottom out and they feel guilty and they beat themselves up and they resent themselves, which I think is a great thing because that shows that they're a high achiever. I go through that and I still go through that. That's why I don't preach that stuff, because I used to go to those events, get jacked up, high five all these strangers, say how I was going to kick ass and I was, always going to be motivated. And then 2 weeks later, I'm feeling down because I feel like I'm not as motivated as what I was 2 weeks ago. But our brain has set this new standard for me and this new expectation, but I can't live up to that expectation all the time. And so when I can't live up to that expectation, I feel like shit. I'm beating myself up. I'm feeling guilty. I'm telling myself that I'm a piece of shit. All of those things, to me, that system does not work. Like, it gives you a small boost, but, I think you need to know how to use it and when to use it. Fire can be a great thing because it can keep us warm, but it can also burn down your house. You've got to know when to use those tools. And I don't think that really many personal development events tell you when to use those tools. And also I found that a lot of personal development speakers live in ideologies, not in truth. And the truth is that those same personal development speakers, and I've spoken with some of the best, highest achieving speakers in the world, and I can tell you right now that they're not always positive. I can tell you right now they're not always motivated, but they don't tell you that. I spoke with this guy who was like this spiritual guru, and he sat there for like 2 hours talking all this shit about, how to be peaceful and how to be loving. He went through, non-judgmental, and he talks nice and slow and soft. If I walked up and I grabbed a dog turd and I smashed it in his face while he was talking, I can guarantee you he's not peaceful. He's definitely going to be judgmental. He will not be happy. It's easy to create that persona and create a whole bunch of followers selling an ideology. It's hard to sell people the truth.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, like, if I told you the truth, right, your life is going to be topsy-turvy your whole fucking life. You're going to have to work your ass off to get what you want. You're going to have to push yourself to the limits, and you're going to break yourself consistently, because in order to build something great, you've got to consistently destroy it. So you have to consistently destroy parts of your life in order to create greater levels. Now, are you okay with destroying parts of your life, or do you just want to keep building great things? Because most people want to just keep building great stuff. They don't want to destroy things. Now, you can't build without destroying. If I'm going to tell you that there's going to be times where you're motivated and you're unmotivated, there's going to be times where you're very negative and positive and negative. Those negative times are going to be just as much as the positive times. So you want 3 weeks of positivity, you're probably going to have times where you go 3 weeks with negativity. Now, how are you going to feel in those 3 weeks of negativity? Beating yourself up, feeling like shit, telling yourself that you're not worthy, sitting on the fucking couch watching TV when you know you've got work to do. Does that sound like something that you want?
And when
most people don't want to be sold that, right? They want to be sold the fantasy and the delusion of an easy life, comfortable, financial freedom. I work with dudes who are almost billionaires, and I've met a couple of billionaires. You know, actually all of my private one-on-one clients are multi-millionaires, and I can tell you right now, they are not positive people. They are balanced people. Intelligent business owners are pessimistic and optimistic. They can look at the future and say life can be better, but they're they're pessimistic enough to go, I know that there are going to be a shitload of problems along the way. How do we mitigate risk? Now, does that make them negative? Does that make them positive? You know, I had someone a while ago say, Elon Musk is a positive person. You know, he's always he's optimistic about the future. If you understand anything about Elon Musk is driven by the idea that humanity is going to not exist in the future. And his whole life is dedicated to making sure that humanity exists after we destroy what he believes is going to happen after we destroy the earth.
Yep.
Now, that doesn't sound like a very positive dude to me. That sounds like a guy who's driven by fear, a guy that's driven by the end of the world and chaos. But at the same time, he is mitigating risk by creating greater future outcomes and by looking at a greater future. That's an intelligent business owner. Intelligent business people are pessimistic and optimistic. They're balanced. They're not positive. They're not negative. I meet plenty of positive business people who are like, you know what, I'm just going to build this business and people will come and everything's going to be great. Startup business owners are great for this stuff. They go to all the personal development events. They high five people. They set these big goals, these big dreams. They go, nothing's going to go wrong. I'm just going to achieve all this great stuff. They start running flat out and then the next second they fall off the cliff, bang, splat. They run out of money. They've pushed away all their friends and their family. They're working all the time. They've put on all this weight. They feel like shit. They're beating themselves up internally and they go, why did it have to be like this? That's someone who's super optimistic. If you're super optimistic, you're going to be super pessimistic at some point.
Wow.
So our brain's trying to create neutral states because neutral is where growth is. But you've also got to remember that there are laws of nature. So there's universal laws and there's laws of nature. Humans fit into both. There are laws that govern the way that the universe works that humans have to live by. Okay, and one of those, I believe, is the law of balance. If you look, I believe that the universe is a rebuilding structure. Like, I believe that the Big Bang is just part of many Big Bangs that are consistently happening. Like, there's brand new stars being born, but there's new black holes are sucking up stars and you know, they're creating quasars, which are pushing out information back into the universe and so on. So I believe that it's a remodeling system. And more cosmology is going down that path. It's slowly getting there. But we've got to break the old paradigm of just that there was one Big Bang that came from nothing, which is interesting in itself because if you talk to cosmologists, a lot of them who come from atheism or have an atheistic point of view truly believe that the Big Bang came from nothing. Yet they're avoiding religion or the dogma of religion. Yet to me, that sounds like a dogma that something was created from nothing, the same as what religion teaches as well. So even though they're both arguing with each other, or especially science is fighting with that, it sounds like the same thing to me. That's really controversial, but you know, I just believe that it's a remodeling system. Everything seems to remodel. Like nothing ever stays the same. It's just remodeling. Nature remodels. Humans remodel. I believe that the universe remodels because there are common patterns that happen all through nature, universe, human behavior, and so on. And that's what I love to study. Now, in nature, one of the laws is that things that don't grow die. So if we're not consistently growing and pushing ourselves to greater levels, we die. And now we might not die physically today, but we're definitely dying mentally, emotionally, spiritually, metaphysically, whatever you want to call it. Parts of our life can die. We could have the most amazing intimate relationship, yet be focused on our intimate relationship and be killing our ability to generate wealth. Now, if you kill the ability to generate wealth, and to make sure that you feel safe, eventually your relationship will be killed by it because you argue in your relationship. Life is about mastering all areas of life, and we've got to become masters of our own life. if you look after your health and you ignore your intimate relationship, eventually your intimate relationship is going to affect your health. So it's important. And this is probably the main reason why I get hired by extremely successful business owners and also big companies, because you might have a CEO that makes shitloads of money, is extremely good at managing people, yet their intimate relationship's crap, and they pride themselves on how much money that they've got, their nice house, their car. That's almost going to definitely become destroyed when their intimate relationship falls apart. Yep. Their wife or husband walks away with half of the thing that they've worked hard for and they pride themselves on it. Imagine cutting your pride in half. That can be destructive and even cause people to become suicidal. But it's because of their own ignorance that they weren't looking at life as a balanced mechanism. But in nature, things grow or they die. Things either evolve or, again, they die off. But also, if you look at it, things in nature grow through pressure and they grow through stress. So if we're not creating pressure and stress, we don't get the growth. Now, most people were trying to avoid stress instead of asking themselves, what would I love to do that's going to create stress, but I would love to take on that challenge? Now, that's a better question, right? Because if I get to wake up and do what I love, I can take on lots of stress, which gives me the greatest possibility and probability of achieving great things in my life. But at the same time, I enjoy doing it. Most people hate what they do, have a lack of clarity in their life. And so because of that, they go, shit, I reckon that there's all these other things that I would love to do. And then they split their focus everywhere, especially because of social media, because everyone seems to have a better body, more money, better house, better car, better relationship. So you split your focus and you go, you know what, I wish I was doing 50 other things except doing what I'm doing today. So they don't never really fully commit to doing something that creates pressure for them. They try and escape the pressure, and in their head, they're living off of fantasies and ideas that life would be better if they do all this other shit, which then destroys their ability to do what and to grow what they've got now. And so it's almost like they're just destroying all these things in their life without ever really creating anything great. Until you get 100% clarity and focus, you'll never really be able to focus on the thing that creates the greatest amount of pressure and stress that you love to do, which for me is this. Like, human behavior, working with people, is one of the hardest jobs I think that most people come across, but I love doing it. I get asked all the time, how do you work with people who whinge and whine and moan all the time and not let it bring you down? Because I work with people in an intelligent way, not an emotional way. You know, the word empathize means to suffer with others. So empathy is to suffer with others. And that's because normally people suffer with others when there's parts of their own life that are painful that they've never dealt with. And those parts of their life that are painful are reflected from others back onto them in order to deal with them. So if you were bullied when you're a kid and you look at someone else who's getting bullied, you empathize with them and you start to suffer with them because it's bringing up shit that you haven't dealt with from your past in order for you to deal with it so you can evolve and progress. That's why the word empathy means to suffer with others. Yeah, on social media on a daily basis, I see people like, you know, we need to be more empathetic people and everyone would just be great if we all got along. Nah, life wouldn't be great if everyone got along. I mean, if you think about it, you take your family, who you probably love, like I do. I love my family. You put me in a house with them for 2 weeks, we'll kill each other.
Yep.
So peace creates war, but war also creates greater levels of peace and understanding.
Yeah, of course.
So we go through cycles of peace and war in all areas of our life. We might go through times where we have peace with our physical body. Yet then we have times where we go to war with our physical body. We have times where we have peace financially, but then we also go to war financially at points in time because it creates evolution and greater levels of understanding. So what I've found is that if you look at laws of nature, laws of the universe, and human behavior, they all seem to link together. Now, when you only study parts of it, you can study human behavior and go, okay, positive thinking makes sense to me because it would be great if we could be positive all the time. Now, that's a great ideology. Like, if I could do nothing forever, that would be fantastic and just get paid ridiculous amounts of money. But you know what? That's called gluttony, which also leads to pain. Most people don't realize that the pleasure and pain model is a very low level animalistic model of human psychology. It's actually a very low level of evolvement. Now, there are lots of people in the personal development space who preach pleasure and pain. But if you're chasing pleasure, it means that you're in pain, right? So in order to chase pleasure, you have to be in pain. Being in pain consistently and fantasizing about pleasure can only lead to a shitty, very cyclical life where you go through highs and lows. I much prefer a model where I'm looking for balance and I realize that high highs create low lows. So I don't want high highs, but I don't want low lows. What I want is consistent progression and evolution on a daily basis because it creates great habits, but those great habits also create a great mission and I'm driven more by my mission than I am excitement. I don't want an exciting life. I want to be driven by my mission. And so coming back to your question when you asked me about what people come to my events for, I think they come to my events because they want no nonsense. I think people are a lot more, I think more and more people are becoming more intelligent and starting to question things. They're starting to go, I've done all these personal development events and I'm still not getting the results that I want. I'm doing all these personal development events and I still feel unfulfilled. I think that they're coming because I question things. I also think they come as well because I'm a no bullshit sort of guy. Like I do not like working with people who want to go and kick rocks. Like I work with people who wake up one day. Our number one core value, our number one driver that I teach people in our whole team. When our team do sales, when our team do marketing, the number one thing that our clients must have is a big goal, a big reason, or a big why. Because the person who hits rock bottom and comes to me and says, I had this, right? So we had this amazing client of ours who's become a good friend of mine. About a year and a half ago, she came to one of my Mullah wealth events and she walked in and she said, Michael, I don't know what to do with life. And I said, okay, so what's happening? And she said, I've got a son who was born with quadriplegic cerebral palsy. He needs full-time care. He will never be able to walk, never be able to talk. But I believe that he's capable of so much more. My husband is using methamphetamines because he can't cope with it. And he had a business, destroyed his business. They're losing money. They're about to lose their house. He's living in a caravan at his parents' house because she's kicked him out of the house. She doesn't want him around the kids. She said, so I've destroyed my marriage. I've destroyed myself. I've got a kid who needs full-time care. I'm the sole parent who's responsible for him. I've also got a daughter as well. I'm just trying to figure it out, but I know I'm capable of so much more. I said to her, you need to come do our Thrive Time event. And she said, I don't give a fuck. I will sell my house and I will be there if I have to. And I looked at her and I smiled and I went, you watch this person. She has a rocket. I'm about to put fuel in that thing. Watch what happens. And it gives me tingles talking about it. Like it almost makes me well up talking about it. Since then, within the last year, she has figured out what she loves to do. She figures out she loves to write. Also, she realized that her son's purpose on earth is to show people how to love. And her son is the most smiling, amazing kid. He's got their Facebook page is called, Instagram is Smiles with Jake. And it's just what he does. And the kid's always smiling. Now, you think if you could never walk or never do anything, look, someone loses a car or their house and they're fucking disabled for life. You get people like Jake who are given, probably, I think, something that you're going to struggle with for the rest of your life. Yet that kid smiles every day. And to me, that's an inspiration. And she said, I just want to teach people how to understand and how to love someone with disabilities and how not to be awkward around him, how to show him that he's just another human being that wants the same as everybody else. And that's understanding and love. And I said, you need to get out there and teach this stuff to schools. And she said, schools won't pay for it. And I said, work with me. I'll help you to get that. She did her first speaking engagement last week at the university, her first speaking gig at uni, talking about disabilities. She's also writing again now, and she's doing some writing for me, and her writing's amazing, and that's what she loves to do. I guarantee you within the next year, so within 2 years of having that breakdown, so she's about a year and a bit into it now, she's already done her first speaking engagement, found what she loves. She's helping out Jake Moore, and her life's on fire. She's on the right track.
Wow. That's amazing.
It's people like that.
Yeah.
But I also get entrepreneurs who are worth $500 million coming to me and saying, you know what? I know that we can do $2 or $3 billion in turnover in this company. How do I do it? I'm the owner of the business. I'm stressed out all the time. I have frustrations. I'm trying to manage heaps of shit. Like I just need someone to bounce ideas off, someone to give me mental clarity. I have people like that as well. So I can't say that I can define it to a certain type of person, but what I know is that their number one trait is a big dream and a big goal. Number two is that they have the courage to work for it and to consistently push and challenge themselves, and that they're driven. I think there are lots of people out there with big dreams and big goals, but they're not prepared to work for it. They want the fantasy of an easy life or financial freedom, which, by the way, is non-existent. I've never met a person who is financially free. I've met people who are financially stable, but those people are normally pushing themselves to greater limits, which doesn't mean that they're free. It traps them more. I know that the more wealth that I generate, the more it traps me, because the more you've got to manage it, the more you have to look after it, the more you have to protect it. So you need legal structures, accounting structures. The government's trying to get their hands on money. You meet more people who are trying to fuck you over And, you get people who come to you every day with opportunities. And if you tell them no, they think you're an asshole. So how do you deal with all that stuff when you have, more money? So there's no such thing as financial freedom. I've met plenty of people who create good wealth and then they go off and live a fantasy life, which is go and travel all the time, don't work, sit on a beach. But after a while, they start to destroy their wealth and then they end up going back to work anyway. Because things that don't grow die. And without pressure, I think one of my greatest quotes that I said years ago at one of my events is that trees grow the deepest roots in the harshest droughts.
Love that.
In the harshest times of our life, that's where we create the greatest foundations of our own growth. So if we're not prepared to push ourselves, to challenge ourselves, to take on greater challenges, we're not going to grow. And at the first sign of challenge, we're going to collapse. I would much prefer to be someone who is pushing myself on a daily basis, used to dealing with pressure, creates good, strong foundations so that when there's financial, the economy flips, there's financial pressures, government problems, all that stuff, I'm so stable that it ain't going to rock me. And if it does, it's only just going to make the leaves rattle a little bit. I know that those roots that I've created are so deep that I'm going to be the last thing that gets pushed over. Mate, sorry, I'm going nuts today.
No, it's
I'm on fire. You woke me up early. I had a coffee on an empty stomach. I'm in.
I mean, a lot of that sort of dialogue was focused around, find what you love and then everything will flow from that. Because to reiterate what you said, when the times get tough, it's your mission and it's your why that will drive you through that tough time. So, mate, I just wanted to explore this a little bit more because I know, and, like the greatest motivational speaker, Les Brown, said that, there was a study done and 70% of the people in the US absolutely hate what they do in their job. And I think that transposes to every country. But
if it's 70%, I would be very, very surprised. I think it's like 95 to 99%.
Yeah, higher, right? So what's your advice? Like, can you take us through a bit of an example of, let's say, for example, I don't like what I do at the moment, for example. I say I'm a client, Michael, I'm struggling. How do you get that person to discover what they truly love so that they can then go and lead their life by design or go and leave their life as truly what makes them happy and then allows them to serve? What process do you go through?
Look, it depends on what you want to do in life. Part of the reason why, I created Thrive Time was because of that reason. I had a meltdown, and that originally was called Life by Design. But we had a trademark infringement, so I changed it to Thrive Time, which to me works better because I love the word thrive. If you want to survive, that's different from thriving. If you want to thrive, we've got to explore a few things, right? So let's explore the word love first because then it makes sense. My sister has 2 kids, Jordan and Ella, which are my niece and nephew. My niece and nephew, I love those kids, but they're a dream and a nightmare at the same time. And any parents who are listening in at the moment go, I get it. I've never met a parent who goes, my kids are always happy. They're always fun to be around. They're amazing. They just, if someone tells you that and you're a parent, you just go, that person is full of shit. Because deep down inside, right, we know that there's a balance. And things that we love, it's like most people know that from a child perspective. But what about on Instagram where you get someone who goes, oh, my relationship's so great all the time. My partner's so loving and they always look after me. If you buy into that stuff, that just shows a sheer lack of intelligence. Because the truth is that their partner's probably just as much an asshole as they are a great person. They argue, they get frustrated. Do you know, Justin, my sales guy, and also my head coach, Justin, a while ago, he said, you need to do more stuff on intimate relationships. And I said, I don't want to do intimate relationships. And he said, why not? And I said, I'm not an intimate relationship expert and all that stuff. And I said, look, Jess and I'm still trying to figure out how to have a fucking relationship, right? I just got married. We've been together for 10 years. I'm still trying to figure it out because I've got no idea what I'm doing. And Justin goes, dude, you do not understand how good your relationship is and how much you've taught me from how you and Jess behave. And he said, do you know, his wife, Sarah, and himself, they said, we used to suppress everything because we were always trying to make the other person happy. But at the same time, we made ourselves unhappy. And that unhappiness we didn't know how to deal with. And so we'd suppress everything and hold on to it, which would make us shut down. And so their coping mechanism in the relationship would be shut down when they were challenged, not to communicate. And sometimes the communication comes through, you know, a good, intelligent conversation, but other time it comes from exploding and just letting it all out. And some of the best times, I think, in life are letting it out. Like, how many times have you yelled at someone or told someone to fuck off, and afterwards you go, oh, that actually felt brilliant, because it was like this huge pressure valve that released everything. But then at the same time you go, oh, I probably shouldn't have dealt with it that way, and you start feeling guilty. So there's a benefit and a drawback to just spitting shit, right? It's just, are you evolving from it to go to a better level? Now, Jess and I still yell at each other consistently, but we used to do it more than what we do now, which shows that the relationship's evolving. And what Justin said is, you know, he said that our relationship was really inspiring because we used to say what we were thinking. And Jess is very quiet and timid when she's around other people, but Jess is very, very strong. I mean, anyone who can put up with my shit, extremely strong thing, right? I don't even like putting up with my shit sometimes. He said what he saw was that even though we worked together, if we had something to say and staff were around, we would have arguments in front of staff. And he said it was great to see, and it inspired him to just say what you've got to say. But at the same time, if we yell at each other, within 10 minutes, it's done. Like, that's it. We don't hold on to that shit. And some couples hold on to that stuff like something that someone did 10 years ago. They're still holding on to, and they still have regret and anger and frustration. But in our society, we call that forgiveness. Forgiveness is horseshit. If you need to forgive someone, what you're doing is you're packaging up the past pain that they've created. You put it in a nice little box, which creates empathy. You put it in a nice little package box, you hide it away in the dark corner, and you pretend that it doesn't exist until they repeat the behavior. Then you open the box up and you go, see, motherfucker, I told you, I knew you'd do it again. I knew it. I couldn't trust you. And you bring it all up again. And we call that forgiveness. That's not what we're after. We're after love. Now, love is the counterbalancing of both positive and negative at the same time. So when you love someone, you go, look, I can understand why you did that in the past. Now, I don't forgive you. What I do is I understand it, and it creates love because I realized that there was a drawback to you doing it, but there was also a benefit to you doing it. Also, there's a benefit and a drawback to me. In order for there to be forgiveness, you have to perceive that that person has more benefits to what they did and you suffered because of it. And then you forgive them. That's not love. That's packaging and hiding.
Yeah.
That's not a good idea. If I look back at the kids who I perceived bullied me when I was younger, I look back at them and I go, at the time, they were probably stressed out, frustrated. They probably had a lot of stuff going on in their life as well. But at the same time, it made them weak because they had to feel strong by bullying me so that they could feel strong. Now, to me, that not only is a strength, but it's also their weakness. When I perceive it like that, I go, I get it. I understand it. It's not good for them, but it's not bad for them. But at the same time, if they didn't bully me, I wouldn't have created such a thick skin, and I wouldn't have been able to take the amount of hits that I've taken now because I'm out there challenging paradigms. If it wasn't for those bullies, I wouldn't be doing what I love to do today. If I didn't do what I love to do today, my life would feel pointless, which means I would have probably killed myself by now. So if it wasn't for those bullies, I wouldn't be out there doing what I love, challenging paradigms, pushing myself, hanging out with some of the smartest thinkers on the planet who are also pushing paradigms. They made me fucking strong, almost bulletproof, mentally and emotionally.
Did you ever?
Now, how could I forgive them?
Yeah, true.
Why do I even need to forgive them?
Wow.
They helped me. They made me who I am today.
Wow, that's so powerful, mate.
That gives me tingles. That's like, it's because of them that I am who I am today. I've got nothing to forgive. They made me great.
That's really, really powerful, because I think a lot of, and I'll speak for this as well, because there was an element of bullying when I grew up as well, and exclusion, and you know, I've trying to work through that, and it's been more of a victim mentality. But I think I've taken so much from what you just said. I think that one conversation has radically shifted my own mindset, just from exactly what you just said, to think that that was actually more of a gift and a blessing, and that's going to take me further in life and eventually help me do what I love, I guess. So I think all our pain can be a blessing at the same time. Would you agree with that?
Look, what I've come to realize, and this is how, I mean, when you came to Life by Design, that was the first ever personal development event that I ran that was like a 4-day event. And so I was swinging for the fences and just trying to hit something. And it sort of started my journey.
Yeah.
When I look at what we've created now in Thrive Time, I still believe right now it's the greatest event on the planet, because if you can figure out how to get clear with what you love and be super clear on it, which is what we do. We go through, do values, purpose, mission, start setting really clear, congruent goals. But at the same time, you've got to balance yourself emotionally, because if you're driven by emotions and fantasies, what you'll do is you'll set your goals and your values and your purpose in life based on a fantasy, which then will only lead to pain, because what goes up has to come back down. And what you'll do is you actually distort who you believe you are as a person, and you won't be who you are as a person. And what you've got to admit to yourself is that you're actually shit at probably most things. You're actually shit at almost everything. It's just that you have a couple of unique gifts that if you don't know how to refine those gifts, then you're never going to do what you truly love, and you're never going to be great at something. You're going to try to be good at everything, which actually means that you're going to be shit at everything because you're average. And most people are trying to average out their life, not be great. I believe that every human being, and this is part of my core belief, every human being on the planet is born to be extraordinary. The question is, what is it? And I've met people with the most fucked up circumstances who come to my events that I sit there sometimes and I go, wow, I can't even believe, like Karina, you know, she was given a extremely difficult circumstance in life. And when I first met her, I was like, one of two things is going to happen. Her life has hit rock bottom and she can only go down. Or the other thing is that she's bound for greatness, because she's already probably done the most difficult things that she's ever going to have to do. And she's still here. If she's strong enough to deal with that, she is going far and she's not going to stop. And my belief in her helped her to get to where she's now driving in that direction. So I believe that every human being is born to be extraordinary. And I've worked with people with so many mental health issues, with all different circumstances. You know, last night I was looking at Dylan Alcott's page, and I'm not sure if you know who Dylan Alcott is, but he was born without the ability to walk, so he's physically disabled. He is one of the guest programs on Triple J. So I think he just resigned, but he's also, I think he's a 3 times Wimbledon or tennis champ. So he's the disabled tennis champion. He's also, I think he also has a gold medal in the Olympics in basketball. So not only has he won a gold medal in Olympics disabled basketball, wheelchair basketball, he's also won, I think, Wimbledon 3 times, or you can probably look it up, and also is a 3 times tennis champion. He was competing at the Australian Open tennis this week. That's why his post was there. He's also a guest programmer on Triple J. He organises music festivals that give great access for people with disabilities. He also does music festivals and things like that, and organises big music festivals with headline acts, great acts for people with disabilities. Now, this guy is using his so-called physical disability, and he's more able than most people with physical abilities.
Amazing.
So you tell me that that's not extraordinary. I watched a guy years ago, I watched 2 extremely obese people walk out to their car. So where I train at the gym, there's a gym and there's a medical center next door, and they both share the same car park. I watched 2 massively obese people walk out to their car and get in the car that were parked in the disabled car park right out the front. At the same time as I walked out, I saw there was a guy in front of me in a wheelchair who'd just come from training at the gym, and he wheeled his wheelchair to the back of the car park, the furthest away park that he could get to. It was the furthest park away, and he wheeled his wheelchair over there and got in his car. Now, what I made the assumption, now I could be wrong, like they might have something wrong with them, but normally obesity is a lifestyle disease, whatever fucking way people want to cut it. I mean, in this day and age, people make up shit so that it fits their thing, like, you know, oh, it's a disease. It ain't a fucking disease. If you go back and you look at it, it's a dis-ease, but it's not a physical disease. If you look at it and you go back and you study a lot of human history and human evolution, you can see that there weren't obese people in tribes and in cultures. It's something that we've created based on our lifestyle circumstances. And that's because we have a surplus of food. People overeat. We're more lazy than what we've ever been. We walk less. We have less reason to move. And yes, now there's mental health issues and stuff like that. But there's a lifestyle-related disease that these people have But at the same time, you've got a guy who's physically disabled that goes to the back of the car park and wheels down there. That guy has more physical ability than those people who parked right at the front of the car park. So we can now question, who's the one that is more disabled? Is it those who are overweight, or was it the guy in the wheelchair? Now, I'm just making a generalization assumption because I could be completely wrong. They might have a huge thyroid issue that's caused a whole... But normally it's a lifestyle disease. I'm just generalizing here and I made an assumption. But it's a good metaphor for the way that we live life. If I believe that every human being is born to be extraordinary and I take that on board in myself, I'm born to be extraordinary, and so are you, and so is everyone who's listening. If that's the case, the question then becomes, what am I extraordinary at? And if you ask that question, it starts to point you into things that you love to do. Now, the things that you love to do are both a dream and a nightmare. So I know that you love traveling, as do I. When you travel, yes, it's great. It's fantastic. You get to see cool shit. The way that you travel is probably different than the way that I travel because we all have different ways that we travel. But when we travel, I have people who come to me and they say, oh, you're so lucky because you get to travel everywhere. Yeah, it's awesome. When you spend 4 weeks or 5 weeks when you're on tour, you're living out of a suitcase. You can never fucking find anything. The shit that you need to run your life is at home, over the other side of the world. You get, airlines that lose your luggage. You got to wait in lineups. Like I remember getting to Houston last year. I'd flown for like 16 or 18 hours straight, had a 5-hour stopover, or I think it was 14 hours, had a stopover in LA, had to wait for my flight out to Texas, had to wait 5 hours in the airport. I was so tired I was nodding off in the airport, but didn't want to fall asleep because I was afraid my shit was going to get stolen. Then from there, I hop on a plane. I'm nodding off in the fucking plane the whole time as I'm flying. The hostess keeps waking me up and, do I want food? Do I not want food? All that sort of shit. The guy next to me kept getting in and out of his seat. Yeah, all of those things are fantastic. I get to Houston. I'm waiting there for the for my bags, and they won't take my stuff off the plane because there's lightning storms. And they said the storm's going to be over in 45 minutes. So my driver's waiting there, waiting for me. 45 minutes, still thunderstorms. I waited for 4 hours, and now I've had no sleep for almost over a day now. I'm like, can hardly stay awake. Everything's starting to become a blur. Then after standing there for 4 or 5 hours or 6 hours or whatever it was, I was like, fuck this, take me back to my hotel. I don't care about my luggage. I don't give a shit. So I've gone back to the hotel. You got to check in, all that stuff. So now I'm knock on another 2 hours. All of those things happen when you travel. But most people just like, oh yeah, traveling's great. That's the fantasy. The reality is that it's just as much of a nightmare as it is a dream. I love traveling, but it comes with downsides. I love owning a business, but it comes with downsides. I love exercising, but it comes with downsides. I love hanging out with people and working with high achievers, but it comes with downsides. There's an up and a downside to everything. So if you don't understand that, you're not going to do what you love. You're going to try and chase fantasies. And when you chase fantasies, you can only live a shit life.
So, mate, this is, how do people love and appreciate the downs? Because I think a lot of people self-sabotage, including myself. When you're negative or you're down, you almost try and radically get back into a positive state or back into a state of feeling good. So how do you love that process?
It's an understanding that we're not looking for good, we're looking for love. And love comes with those both sides. Like I keep reminding myself, like I'm not looking to have a great day. I'm looking to do what I love today. And when I do what I love today, there's going to be challenges that I need to take on. So then the question becomes, what challenges am I going to take on? What's going to put me under pressure and stress, but not too much pressure and stress so that I enjoy the day, but not that I create too much of a positive. Because you've got to remember, right, the brain tags, I believe because of partially evolution, our brain is always looking for safety. It's always looking for security, and it's looking for things that allow us to have those things. So if we get something where we get overly elated and overly excited, our brain tags that. So it's almost, when I use the word tag, it doesn't create a tag, but what it will do is our brain creates a perception that that's how life should always be. Now, you'll see this when someone makes a lot of money really, really quickly, like say through Cross Lotto or they win Lotto. And again, this is another delusion with society. Like if I just win money, then life will be easier. You will fuck up your life if you win money and you win excessive money or you do large amounts of sales that you're not used to handling. because there's a downside. Unless you increase your responsibility at exactly the same moment and you have the tools to cope with it, you will destroy it all. And so what can happen is if you go from a level that's, say, mid-range and you quickly increase your level of doing anything, your brain tags it and says, that's the way I should be. That's the way it should be all the time. Now, when your brain does that, it creates a fantasy and a delusion, which then can only make you feel like shit, because today you will not feel the same way that you felt that day. So that's why if you go to those hyperactive motivation events, your brain tags it and goes, I should be motivated like that all the time. Then what will happen is after a couple of days or a couple of weeks, your brain will go, shit, I don't feel that way today. Why am I down? And you start coming up with all these questions because your brain's trying to figure out how to survive again. And so you go back into a survival mode and it's trying to figure out what you did, and it's trying to compartmentalize and piece together what I did last time in order to get that feeling, because I want that feeling every day. Now, while you're doing that, you're creating mental chaos and mental noise, which means you're not in the moment. You can't be fulfilled. You're not present. And your brain's thinking about the past or past experiences while at the same time fantasizing about a future ideal. So all that's happening is you've created all this separation in your brain, and it's noisy, which then now means that you're stressed out, you're probably going to be frustrated, you're feeling crap, and you're going to have more crappy days than you're having good days until you hit the next delusion that you're going to create. So what I would prefer to do is I would prefer to just be more present in my daily actions, not get excited, not be too over exaggerated, but just do things that I love to do. Like today, I'm going to go to the gym. I love going to the gym, but at the same time, it's a pain in the ass. It's stressful. Most training sessions, I feel like I'm going to throw up. I push myself to the limits, but I love doing it. If I go without a couple of days from going to the gym, I start to feel just flat and like I want to go to the gym again. I start craving it. It's that craving that then tells me that there's something in it that I love to do. And that's the way that we start figuring it out. Like there's a whole process. So Thrive Time's obviously a 4-day event where I have to break down a whole bunch of people's fantasies, ideals, all of that stuff in order to get clarity around what you love. But it's a lifelong process. Coming to my 4-day event isn't going to change 60 years or 30 years of delusions that you've created. But what I do is I give you the toolbox that you can go back and reassess at any point in time those same things. And I still do it in myself. And sometimes I have people who come to my events and they think that a 4-day event is going to change their life. If you think that a 4-day event is going to change your life, you're probably delusional in the first place, and that event's not going to be the event for you. Go to someone else's event and high five strangers and jump up and down and get excited, because you'll feel like shit in 3 weeks or a month, and then you'll crave it again, and you'll waste all your money trying to relive those same experiences. All you are is a crack addict without crack. It's a motivational event. And to me, that's a shitty existence. You're going to waste all your money on something trying to get something that is unattainable consistently. So I would much prefer to give people a toolbox where after those 4 days, I can go, here's the roadmap to your life. When you hit roadblocks, though, go back to the map, reassess the map again, create clarity, and keep moving forward. And that's what I do. Now, in order to do that, you just need to be given the right tools. And so I think, though, that your brain is intrinsically trying to figure out how to go back to what you love, and it will be a craving. So I'll give you an example. My mum, she is a very highly structured person, and she loves structure. She works for a government department. She's been there for like 20 years. She loves having that certainty of getting to work at 9 o'clock in the morning and 5 p.m. If she's got to work late some nights, she gets stressed because, you know, she's working past her time and it breaks her structure. So when I look at my mum, I can already tell that she's got a high value on structure. Yet at the same time, she has a high value on travel and experiences. So my mum loves to travel, and when she goes away, she can go she went to South Africa. Her and my old man went away last year. And when they went away, they traveled for 2 weeks together. Then my dad came home, but my mum traveled for 2 weeks backpacking by herself through South America. Now, when I look at my mum's behavior, my mum goes back to, she travels for a while, but then she has to go back to her structure. So I know that in her head, structure is important, but travel is also important. When my mum travels, she loves to have structure in the way that she travels, but she loves to have experiences that then allow her to expand on that structure and to do things outside of the structure. So when you think about it, to me, I would hate to backpack. Like, I don't do that. That's not my form of travel, but that's her way of travel. When I travel, though, my team put together the structure because I hate structure. So my team give me my structure. I will go and do that structure, but I hate creating the structure. My mum loves creating the structure, but then loves to travel and to expand on her structures. So even though we have a similar value of travel, we both travel in different ways and we both use different mechanisms to do it. My mum loves having the structure of a 9-to-5 job. I hate that structure. So for me, structure is not so important. My highest value is my own personal development, my own personal growth. So I love learning. I love thinking, but I only do it for me. I don't do it for everybody else. Like I don't go out to the world and teach everybody else how to live this amazing life. For me, what I care more about is me living an extraordinary life so that I can lead by example to teach others how to do it. That's why I do it. And the hard part is being honest with yourself, because we're in a society that says, well, you shouldn't do that. If you're teaching other people, it should be all about them. But to me personally, I feel like I'm a fraud if I do that. In my life, I go, I'm the most important person. If I treat myself as the most important person in this world and I live an extraordinary life, then I can be an inspiration to those who want the same. So then my second highest value is going out to teach other people how to do it. Then my third highest value is health, vitality, energy, training, all of those things. So my health is very important. Now, when I look at that, that determines how I live my days and how I live my weeks. I have to learn and consistently grow, which my brain never stops doing. Even when I'm around other people, my brain's always assessing, what are they doing well? What aren't they doing well? How can I implement that in my own life? How can I go and teach that to others? But then I know that if I go and do that consistently without looking at my health, I start to self-sabotage those higher values to get back my health. Self-sabotage is, and I'll say this really clearly because it's everyone who's listening in, it'll be a game changer. The only reason why we self-sabotage is because we're prioritizing our values. That's all that it is. When you try to live someone else's value system, you will over-prioritize someone else's values as being more important than your own, and you'll create a delusion of fantasy that says, if I live their values, I'm going to have a better life. But at the same time, in your brain, subconsciously, you'll go, I hate doing this shit. I don't want to do this stuff. The other things that I do are more important. Therefore, I'm going to prioritize that more important thing over the thing that I set as a goal. And then you self-sabotage the goal that you set, but the goal was never congruent in the first place. That's why I still believe Thrive Time is the greatest event on the planet, because if you can get clear with your values, you understand where your sabotage patterns will be. You understand what you love to do. You understand what creates you drive and determination and the things that your brain will never, ever let you get away from. For me, I can't stop thinking about my own self-growth. I can't stop it. You know, I have friends and family and they're like, oh, you know, when you're getting married and you're on your holiday and your honeymoon, all that stuff, it's great because you won't have to work. My brain's always working. It never stops. It never stops because I'm always trying to figure out what's working, what's not working, human behavior. Jess acts in a certain way and I'm analyzing it. My brain never stops.
Wow, that's
because
powerful.
it's what I love to do. It never stops. So once I got congruent with who I was as a person, it creates a clear path and I can just stay on that path and go flat out. But there are definitely times where old sabotage patterns come up, where I look at someone else's life or someone else pops into my head when I'm making a decision. And I make a decision not based on what I truly congruently want, based on something that someone said from a past experience that I still haven't learned how to balance out yet. And what that does is it gives me a learning or an experience that I need to learn from and grow from in order to become more of myself. And that's part of my journey. We all have it. We all go through it. So the more congruent you are with yourself, the more life flows. But the less you want high highs, the less you want low lows, the less you try and escape pain and crave pleasure and all those things. You don't have those emotional volatilities. But at the same time, I can choose those emotional volatilities. So there are definitely still times where, you know, I go out and I party and I run amok and I do crazy shit and my brain goes, oh, this is fun. And then a week later I go, oh man, I feel down, I'm depressed. What's going on? And then I go, that's what it was, is I just created a new delusion. But again, I learn from it and I evolve and I move on. That's how we all grow. It's from those pressures. I just don't do it as much. So I call it the refractory period. I still get depressed, but I might have 5 minutes of feeling depressed. Whereas in the past, I had like 10 years of feeling depressed.
Right.
I get anxious, but I have like 3 minutes of feeling anxious because I catch myself and I go, shit, I'm not breathing correctly. I've created a stress response because I believe that I need to be somewhere faster than what I am, which is always the trigger for anxiety. Anxiety, every human being that I've worked with who has anxiety has an idea that they need to be somewhere faster than how fast they're going at the moment. And it could be a goal. It could be a fantasy that life would be better if they get there faster, or they're in a rush. Like if you think about it, if you give yourself 20 minutes to get somewhere and it's a 20-minute car trip and you leave with 20 minutes And all of a sudden, you get an unforeseen circumstance like roadworks. All of a sudden, when you hit roadworks and you go, shit, I'm going to be running late, bang, anxiety triggers. Well, the same thing can happen when you set a goal and you go, that goal, I reckon I can achieve that goal in 1 year. Yeah, like I have people come to my events and they go, I want to be a millionaire within a year. And you go, okay, cool. That's achievable. It's definitely possible. The question is it probable based on your past circumstances and your knowledge? So there's 3 different questions there. Is it possible? Well, actually there's 2. But is it possible and is it probable? And is it realistic? Which means, can it be done? So, I mean, there are certain things that can't be done, like maybe not. But just things like, you know, as a human, I can't fly with my own wings. That's impossible because I don't have them. So once we crack that, then the question becomes, is it possible? So is it possible to make $1 million within a year? Yes. Now, the question then becomes, is it probable? And the probability, I asked the person, so how much money did you make last year? I made $40,000. Okay, cool. What did you make the year before? I made $40,000. Okay, what did you make the year before that? I made $38,000. Okay. Now the question becomes, is it probable in the next year that you're going to make $1 million? We know that it's possible. The question is it probable? Now for that person, they could possibly do it because I did it. I went from $80,000 to $1.2 million within a year.
Wow.
But what I know is that I worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, was stressed out to the point of throwing up and almost shitting blood to get to that point. Now, the question then becomes, is that the way that you want to live to get there? Because it's not fun. It sucks. It's painful. It's stressful. You disconnect from everybody around you. And the only thing that you're ever going to do is work. Yep. That's it. Your whole year. Is that the life that you want? Now, they might turn around and go, well, no, it's not really what I want. And you go, okay, well, what's more realistic now? Let's set something that's probable. That's not saying that you can't get there within 10 years. You could be a millionaire within 10 years, but let's do it at a slower pace that's allowing you to build good habits and still also enjoy life in the process. Now, what that does is that starts to remove the anxiety. I've watched a lot of entrepreneurs who just live with anxiety because they're trying to achieve something in too short a time frames for their knowledge, their skill level, and so on, and they become really anxious, really stressed out, frustrated, really snappy. I've been there. And so normally anxiety is just too short a time frames to achieve something. That's all that it is. And if you adjust the time frames, normally you'll get rid of the anxiety. Now, yes, there's chemical responses, and yes, it can be that the person becomes massively adrenaline driven, which then it becomes a chemical response that you've got to deal with as well because they'll have withdrawals from the chemical. I just went through it at the end of last year. I said to myself, I'm not going to be adrenaline driven this year. I'm going to be inspiration driven. I sat on the couch and went, I'm having 2 weeks where I'm going to do nothing. I'm just going to do anything that I feel like in the moment, but it's not going to be work. And within about 5 minutes, I felt my body starting to kick, going, shit, I've got to get that done. I've got to get that done. And I was like, hang on, whoa, just stop. And it was like a horse kept kicking me. I'd just be sitting on the couch and I'd be watching TV and my brain just goes, oh shit, I've got to go get that done. And it's like this adrenaline kick that just goes bang and you can feel it in your body kicking. Because the adrenaline wanted to kick back in to create some form of stress because in the past, that's what has helped me to achieve where I've gotten to.
Yeah.
Because I was driven by stress. I was driven by pain, but it gets to a point where that stops working. Do you know a lot of highly successful entrepreneurs that I've worked with are driven by fuck you. That's what they're driven by. Because they had the teacher when they were younger say, you can't do that. They had a parent when they were younger saying, you'll never get anywhere in life and you won't do that and you should do this and you should be that. And so their whole driver for achieving everything has just been to tell everyone else, fuck you. And in their own head, if you say to them, you can't do that, they'll go, fuck you, and they'll go and do it. For me, that was my driver. I remember my Latin teacher at about 13 or 14 said to me, with your bad attitude, you'll never get anywhere in life. And in my head in that moment, I remember my brain going, fuck you. And I remember my mum saying, you've got to go to university and get a good education and get a good job. And I remember sitting there thinking, fuck you. And then I remember having relationships where someone said to me, you know, Michael, you'll never ever get what you want to get in an intimate relationship. Or them breaking up with me to go out with a guy that was more attractive. And in my head, I went, fuck you. And I went to the gym and I started training. And so I was just driven by fuck you. And most entrepreneurs are. Most high achievers are driven by that. But it gets to a point where that becomes destructive. All the things that you created, you can't keep creating at that level anymore. You've got to flip it. You have to get to that point. But what starts to happen is that when you get to that point where you go, I can't be driven like this anymore, you start to then go, okay, I need to be driven by something else, which really needs to become inspiration and doing what you love. When you get to that level, though, you've got to calm and slow everything down, which means you need to stop the adrenaline response. When you stop the adrenaline response, all of a sudden, all your fears kick up. If I'm not driven and I don't keep doing stuff and I don't get stuff done, and if I'm not going flat out all the time, I'm going to lose everything. And if I lose everything, then I'm nothing. And then all those people are going to be right, and I'm not going to amount to anything, and I'm not going to be good enough. All of those things start kicking up, and you've got to grab all those things and deal with all of those mental responses. Because if you don't, you'll go back to being destructive and you'll start destroying things so that then you can be driven again by fuck you. So that's where I come in. Like, a lot of entrepreneurs work with me and come to my events because they're sick of being driven by that pressure, and they want a greater life, and they need more balance, and they need less of that frustration and that stress response. But at the same time, they don't know how to deal with it, because once they stop, all of a sudden, all their fears kick up, all of their worries kick up, all of their concerns kick up, and they don't know how to deal with it and how to process it. And they don't know what to do because they're afraid that they're going to lose everything that they've worked hard for. You know, if you imagine 20 years of being driven with stress and anxiety and frustration and trying to prove yourself to everybody, and all of a sudden you stop, all of that driver goes, and your fear becomes, what happens if it doesn't work? But the thing is that in life, what I know is that if you don't play the game to win, you play the game not to lose, because they're two different things. A lot of people in life play the game not to lose, which is why they never win. You either play the game to win, or you don't play the game at all. And most people play the game of life trying not to lose. Like, I don't want to be poor. Well, that's why you're poor. I don't want to be fat. That's why you're fat. It's because it's all the things that you don't want to be that are driving you instead of what you want to be. You've got to flip that around 180 degrees. And when you get to that point, you'll be driven by inspiration, but you're going to have, you need to have someone like myself who, if I'm working with high-level entrepreneurs on call, where I go, look, just call me if that stuff starts to kick in, or I need to kick their ass sometimes and say, look, pull your head in, like, this shit's not going to keep working for you. I've got 2 entrepreneurs that I'm working with at the moment who have built like $14 to $20 million companies. And they're going through it at the moment. They're having withdrawals, just like a drug addict, because they've been driven by the chemical response of adrenaline, and they're driven by stress. But you take away the stress and they don't know how to deal with it because they're afraid they're going to lose the driver that got them to where they are. But that's not going to be the thing that's going to help them get to the next level. I don't even know what the question was, mate, that you asked, but I'm in flow today, so I'm just going to let loose.
It's all right.
I'm really enjoying this conversation as well, by the way. Like, you're asking really good questions, and it's, you know, I just hope that I'm helping someone out there. I hope one person's listening that goes, you know what, this stuff's cool, and it's different. And, you know, hopefully I might see them one day at one of our live events, or, you know, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm with you, mate. You know, and that.
By the way, what was the question?
Oh, fuck. I think, what did we say? I think we spoke about, mate, to be honest. I'm so entrenched in all the wisdom that you're throwing at me that I've forgotten as well. But I set up the podcast for exactly what you said. You know, if there is someone that is struggling out there, I really hope that something that we've spoken about throughout this discussion just triggers one thing, you know, just one thing that could potentially change their life. And I went to your first event, and I remember how proud you were when I rang you and I said that I was going to come to the event. Like, I could just feel how passionate you were about the work that you do. So I'm so happy that I come to the event, because there were bits in the, to be honest, the whole thing was transformational, but I'm still working on things, you know, in all honesty.
We all are.
We all are, you know, but I really hope that this podcast is inspiration for many people. And I know this podcast is going to really, really inspire a lot of people. Mate, don't worry, mate, I'm trying
to get death threats as well at the same time. Like, I put out some wicked content, and I think this is awesome. And then I log on to Facebook and I get, you're a prick, you know, I can't believe you said that shit. And I'm like, there we go. But then at the same time, I get, you know, a lot of people, I won't say that I help people who struggle, because that's not my place in the world. You know, like, I'm not the mental health guy, or, you know, I don't, yeah, that's not my place. What I want to do is I just want to work with people who know deep down inside that they're born to kick ass.
Yeah.
You know, when I have someone like Karina who comes to me and says, look, my life is pretty much like I'm losing my house. My husband's left. He's a drug addict. He's living in a caravan. My son's got quadriplegic cerebral palsy and needs full-time care for the rest of his life. I've got a daughter as well that I need to make sure gets attention as well because I'm always looking after my son. You know, I know that I'm better than this. That's the shit that gets me revved every day. And when I'm going through hell and back, like, you know, last year, where the last 2 years, the company has grown so much and so quickly that I wasn't able to control it. And it created so much stress for me last year because, as I mentioned before, when we had a bit of a private chat, that it was like 4 horses running in 4 different directions. And I was sitting on all of them and it was just ripping my legs apart and I was tearing myself to bits, but I didn't even know it. That's what happens when businesses grow too quick. And that's what we did. And so, you know, when I'm going through times where I'm stressed out and I'm frustrated and I'm wondering why I even do this shit and why, they're the people that I remember. And that's the thing that gets me going. I'm like, do you know, I definitely have days where I'm like, you know what, fuck this shit. You know, I've got enough money now where I could just put it in the bank or I could just invest in the share market and just sort of live off of that. And then like that sounds like a good idea for a day. And then after that, I'm like, no, I'm back on the bandwagon. I'm like, let's go. We've got people out there who are ready to kick ass. Let's go do this again. And that shows that you love it. Like when you can't get away from it, even in the hard times, your brain keeps going back to it. That's when you do what you love. And it's, you know, it's things like that that really drive me and that remind me of why I do what I do. And they're people who just rock up in any circumstance. You know, when I rock up with a person who comes, that client who's almost a billionaire, when I started working with him, his business was doing about $70 million turnover a year. And he was about he was 32 years of age. So extremely successful. And he just came to me and he said, I want to turn this into $1 billion company. And I'm like, yes, let's do this. Like, I'm in. I don't care what the goal is or the dream is. Not everyone has those dreams. But what I care about is that they dream big and that they're prepared to do the work. You know, everyone has dreams and fantasies, but they're not prepared to work. Like I want to work with people who want to work, who want to do the stuff. And if they're struggling mentally and emotionally, but they know they're born for greatness, then I'm definitely the guy. But at the same time as well, if the victim mentality where in our society at the moment, especially in Australia, there's so much emphasis on mental health and what is mental health. But when you look at it, it's actually unhealthy. Like when we talk about physical health and the healthcare industry are two different things. You know, the healthcare industry studies disease in order to try and figure out what health is. Whereas people who are healthy focus on health. They don't focus on disease. They focus on fucking health. It's two different things. You know, it seems so simple and so logical.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to me that as a society, we're so fucking illogical, yet try to be logical at the same time. And it's just dumb. Like I ask people in my events, I run health events every now and again. And I ask, one of my first questions is, if you wanted to be a millionaire, would you go and study, would you want to hang around other millionaires, or would you want to go and hang around a whole bunch of homeless people who have no money to try and find out what not to do in order to figure out how to do it?
Yeah, it's good example.
Now, what would you do? Because like, I just for instance, what would you do? You'd hang around millionaires, right? Because they have the result that you want.
Yeah.
In the health industry, we go and study, more money is spent, like, I couldn't even tell you the multiple amount, like the difference between how much study goes into actually studying health versus disease. I would suggest that there is probably hundreds of billions of dollars more goes into disease, trying to study disease and disease care than goes into health. Like when I look at my healthcare, so I've got health insurance. In my health insurance, my options, I get very, very few, limited amount of money back for my options. So if I go and see the chiropractor, I get like out of an $80 session, I might get $20 back. Now, as the year goes on, at the end of last year, I got like $1 back from an $80 visit. Now I'm trying to stay healthy, yet my healthcare provider gives me fuck all money back to stay healthy. But if I go and have major heart surgery, they pay the whole thing. Now, to me, isn't that ridiculous?
It's counterintuitive.
It's counterintuitive. We're trying to create health by giving more benefits to having disease. And as a society, we offer people more support by having disease or mental health issues than we do helping people perform at their peak and also to be healthy. It's counterintuitive. My goal is to try to reverse that in our community where our community are rewarded more for being healthy, for being mentally healthy, for performing at their peak. I want to hang around more people like that because that's what helps drive me to do greater things. But as a society, what tends to happen is because there's limitations on thinking. And we can call it, I think that it was Carl Jung called it the animalistic instinct. The animalistic instinct is to avoid pain, move towards pleasure. We avoid things that we consider a predator, and we move towards things that we consider prey, which is why people sometimes overeat and so on, because they're actually a predator. And in times of stress where they consider that they're being preyed upon by an external, they will move towards something where they consider themselves a predator, which is why people will overeat and so on. There's a whole predator-prey model that goes on in our head. All of those things, we try to avoid things that challenge us, and we move towards things that seem to be easy for us, because then we can become the predator and we're not preyed upon. It's a really animalistic way of thinking. But what tends to happen is when someone's challenged, the animalistic way of thinking is that if we want to try to avoid the challenge, but at the same time, if we get over-supported from the challenge, we'll go back to the challenge because there's more benefits to being supported than there is being alone and taking on the challenge. So most entrepreneurs that I meet, they feel lonely. Why do they feel lonely? Because there's absolutely fuck all people out in the world who are actually taking on massive amounts of challenges and are pushing themselves to the limits. And very few people in our society, like when I drive my R8, down to the shops, there are less people who are supportive, but there are definitely more people who are probably thinking that dude's a drug dealer. He's probably doing something wrong. I wonder who he's ripped off. If I park my car on a white line in a car park, people take photos of that shit and go, what a fucking dickhead. I see it all the time on social media with supercar pages. If you own a supercar and you park it on a white line, people lose their fucking minds. But if you do it in a normal car, no one even notices. It's just because in our society, people will challenge you if you're achieving at great levels. And that's cool. That's cool. That's part of society. But don't take that on board as though you're getting challenged more, because my whole thing is I would prefer to be challenged by people in our society, by the 90%ers, and then tell me what a piece of shit I am and how crap I am and what an asshole I am and how I probably rip people off and why I'm probably doing all the wrong things. I would prefer them to do that and go to bed at night time realizing I'm doing the right thing. I'm inspired. I'm inspiring others. And that there are 10% of people out there who believe in me, who love what I do, and they're also achieving at that level. I would prefer to go to bed at night time and be congruent with myself and have other people disown me, but be cool with who I am as a person. Yep. And not doing it where I've disassociated, because there are plenty of people who are just assholes and they disassociate. They go, oh, fuck everyone, I don't care. And that's a disassociation method. I just want to go to bed at night time and go, you know what, today I did the best. I did the right thing by those people, whether they realize it or not. And I'm doing the best thing for me at the same time.
Yeah.
If I go to bed and do that, I'm happy. I tried doing it the other way and it just created an absolute miserable life. And I had people come up and go, oh, you're the nicest guy. I'd have clients who'd go, oh, look, we owe you 20 grand, but, I'm not going to pay you because, I'm struggling a little bit. And I go, yeah, that's cool. But at the same time, I take on their struggle based on their irresponsibility around their financial situation. And so because of that, their financial problem now becomes my financial problem. They live a great life. I live a shit life. They get rid of their stress. I get more stress. And I do it because they come to me and go, you're a nice person. Fuck that. They took on a responsibility. Now they're responsible for that. I'm not responsible for that. I'm not letting them be irresponsible and get away from the commitments that they made. That's their commitments. They committed to doing what they do. They're not following through on their commitments. Maybe that's the reason why they're struggling financially, is because they have a lack of an ability to believe in themselves and follow through on the things that they commit to. Maybe if I hold them accountable, I'm actually being a better person, whether they realize it now or not. They will in the future, because I know that there were times in my life where I was irresponsible and someone said, no, you're accountable. And I went, fuck you. And I went nuts at them. And I went, what a piece of shit. And 10 years later, I look back at them and go, man, they held me accountable. And I'm so glad they did that, because it pushed me to greater levels.
Mate, just like you're an influence to many people based on your drive, who's been the biggest influence on your life, and what's the biggest thing they've taught you?
Look, I don't have an answer to that. Like, I get asked a lot, what are the favorite books that I've read? And you can see, like, I've got a pretty hectic bookshelf behind me. That's only part of the books that I've got. I've got a little library in another room as well. But it's hard to say, because every interaction has an influence in some way. I've met people who say one thing and it's completely changed the direction of my life. But I've met other people that I've known for 20 years, and they've just them being around consistently on a consistent basis have changed my life. Like I look at Jess, and Jess has been with me for 10 years now. And she's someone who frustrates me more than any human being on the planet apart from myself. But at the same time is someone who, watching her push her limits, and she's completely different. Like I love pressure and I love stress and I love pushing the limits in life. She's very calm and methodical, and she's more slow in the way that she does things, but just very, just very methodical in the way that she does things. And that inspires me. And it makes me question whether I do things the right way or whether she does, or whether there's a balance there. And that helps me. I've definitely met people, like I remember, years ago, the first time that I'd ever come across any of this stuff was Tony Robbins. And I remember looking at his stuff and going, wow, like I can actually, I can actually think positive. And at the time I was going through like depression, I had chronic fatigue and a whole bunch of stuff. And I was like, this guy's telling me that there's a different way of thinking. And I think that got me on the journey. But then I got to a point where I went, this stuff doesn't work anymore. And so I had to shift to find gaps again to help me to keep solving my problems. So I would say that, look, every interaction that I've ever had has been an inspiration in some way. And some of those, you don't realize how inspirational, like plenty of people show me not what to do, like what not to do in life. I've had friends in the past where I look at their life now and I go, holy shit, I would never, ever want a life like that. But at the same time, they're inspirational.
Yeah.
I met a guy in South Africa only recently because, we're very lucky. Like you're in the UK at the moment. I'm in Australia. There's awesome opportunities in those countries, and opportunities are a lot easier in these countries. But at the same time, these two countries have some of the highest depression rates in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have some of the highest suicide rates in the world. And that makes me ask the question, are we lucky or are we unlucky? What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks to being in these countries? And what can happen is that we get in this country, as a country as a whole, we're so fucking lazy. I go to countries like Indonesia quite regularly. Now, if you don't work, you die. That's it. It's really that simple. Like if you don't work, you die. You don't retire. You retire when you can't physically work anymore, and the responsibility becomes your family, and they work hard to support and provide for their family. And that's it. When I go to Indonesia, there's when I'm in Bali, especially, I've got a good friend of mine over there who's a driver. Now, he works 7 days a week. He works 6 days a week. He normally has 1 day off every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. And that he said that's when I just can't physically work anymore. But other than that, he just works. And he works from like 8 o'clock in the morning, drops his kids off at school, and he works as a taxi driver or as a driver. And he might work until midnight or 1 o'clock every night. And that's just what he does. It's part of their culture. So they have this extremely hard work ethic. And they don't know any different. They don't get driven by all this gluttony. Whereas in Australia, it's sort of like, it's 5 o'clock. Like I really don't have to work past 5 if I don't want to. And, I want my weekends. But at the same time, I want $1 million house. And I want a brand new Porsche in the driveway. And if I can't have that, then I'm depressed because I shouldn't have to work that hard if I don't want to. Like I should just live this free-flowing life. So is that a benefit or is it a drawback? I'm not too sure. It could be both. I'm not 100% sure. And, there are plenty of people who come to my events and things like that, especially like our low-level events, like our 2-hour events. And they say, oh, yeah, but, you're probably lucky because you got born, you were born into a wealthy family. Well, that's horseshit. My parents were 17. Like, fuck. My parents bought their first house when I was 19. And from there, they just worked their ass off. My old man had 2 jobs. I used to go pick my sister up from kindergarten when I was 5. I used to go and pick up my sister from kindergarten because both my parents were working and take her home. And I would cook food for both of us because we were both hungry after school. And then I'd go ride my BMX bike with my mate across the road. Like that was my life. So, if you look at circumstances like that, you can always make reasons and justifications as to why your life's shit and why everyone else has a great life. But the truth is that people create great lives because they work for something that has meaning, and that's it. And things are important to them. When I met this guy last year when I was in South Africa and I was working, every morning I get on my computer and I worked. And when I was eating breakfast, this guy came across and he said to me, excuse me, sir, like I notice you working every day and I was just wondering, like, what do you do? And I got into what I do and some of the conversations in here. And he said, wow, that's really inspiring. And I said, tell me your story. And he said, Michael, look, I grew up in the slums and my parents had nothing. We used to live in I don't know if you've seen the little slums in South Africa where they're almost like little tin sheds that it literally, you could, the sheds that we have in Australia that you put your lawnmower in are bigger than the fucking houses they live in. And there's two kids in this house with, you know, a drum that they have a bit of wood sitting on top of, and that's their kitchen sink. And other than that, they cook everything, they do everything in there, and that's it. And they walk down to the well, they get water, and they come back. It's not sort of like what you see, for those that don't know, it's not what you see on you know, the World Vision ads and all that stuff of like the little kids suffering and stuff. You know, they're very community orientated, but at the same time, they have a lot of crime. Like, it's legal to have guns over there. So they have guns and they're not afraid to use them. And if someone wants to rob you, they'll rob you. You know, South Africa has 33% unemployment, or when I was there, they did. So they don't fuck around over there. You got to be really careful. But at the same time, they're awesome people because they come together and they help each other, and very friendly. Most of them anyway. But anyway, he said, look, I grew up in the slums and I was determined that I didn't want the same thing for my family. So he said, I just worked really, really hard at school, got a really good job. I knew that I wanted to have a good job. I knew I couldn't afford to go to university, but what I did was once I finished school, I came to Sandon, which is like the really nice, expensive area. And he said, I got a job working at the hotel, and I've always loved working with people, but I also love business. So I start work at 5 a.m. every morning. But what I realized was that because we don't have internet at home, I wanted to use the internet. So I would come to work at 3 a.m. and I would get in there. And I'm not sure if he walked, because a lot of people in South Africa walk everywhere because they don't have a car. They can't afford a car. So I'm not sure if he walked or catch a bus. Like, as you drive through South Africa, especially in Johannesburg, you'll see like mobs of people standing on the side of the road and they're just waiting for buses because it's the only transport that most of them can afford. He said, so I'd come into work, I would start at 5, but I'd get into work at 3, and every morning from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. I would do research into business, mindset, running a company, building a company, and what it takes. And I can't remember, he's been working at the Sandton Sun, which is the hotel that I stayed at, for like 5 or 7 years. He's now in management in that area. He said he's the first person in his family ever to own a house.
Wow.
And at the same time, he said, look, I would love to follow what you do. His name's Bruce. And he said, I'd love to follow what you do as well, because you're very inspiring. And he said, look, I created a hair care business because most of the hair care that we have in South Africa is built for Western people with different hair. And he said, we have different, like thicker hair and so on. It's harder to manage. So I built a hair care company. And now I'm selling products and things like that and trying to get it out to the market. Now, to me, that's someone who's inspiring. Yep. He put it all on the line in order to create the life that he wanted. That dude inspires the shit out of me. And I talk about Bruce at almost all of my events, because when someone comes to me and they say, oh, you're probably lucky because you came from a wealthy family. And, you know, well, okay, so if I came from a wealthy family, where did my family get their wealth from? Oh, well, they probably inherited it. Okay, well, eventually someone's got to have no money. The truth is, the reason why people have money is because they offer value to society in some way. Now, even if it's inherited, you have a choice. It's either going to expand or it's going to contract. Nothing ever stays the same. So those who inherit money, most of them contract their wealth. And so they'll lose all of their money. And there's the third generation curse. It's known as the third generation curse. And I've got a client, I've got a couple of clients actually over the years, and I've got one currently who's inherited a lot of money. They have more pressure than the average person, because if they lose it all, they're a fucking disgust to their family.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the client that I've got is fourth generation. Now, fourth generation, imagine that. Your great-grandfather builds a company. It's inherited by your grandfather, which then is maintained by your father. If you lose that money, you're going to be the world's biggest piece of shit to every member of your family. And those families might have 50 people now wide, in depth, that know about the wealth. Because you've got to remember, that person great-grandfather probably had 4 or 5 kids or 6 kids. Then each one of them has had kids, and then they have kids. So their wealth gets divided amongst all of those. If you lose that money, you're not only a piece of shit, but you're a piece of shit now to 50 people and 4 generations prior to you of all that hard work. That's a massive amount of responsibility that would crush 90% of people. Yet most people don't think about that. They go, oh, well, it's lucky because now you just get to buy cars and houses. And okay, cool. So you go out and you buy a whole heap of cars, a whole heap of houses. You go traveling all the time. What just happened to that wealth? It's contracted.
Yeah.
If you keep contracting that wealth, you're going to end up with nothing. And if you end up with nothing, you've got to live with that for the rest of your life, that you got given something and lost it all, and your family built it. That's a massive responsibility. Yes. So when I hear something like, oh, well, it's probably inherited, that's like the biggest scam that low-level, unintelligent people come up with in order to support the reason why they can't achieve what they want in life. That's all that it is. So when I meet someone like Bruce, I use his story in our events to show it doesn't matter where you start from. Now, he's not a multimillionaire, and you know what? He's not traveling in private jets, but he's still someone who massively inspires me because he took it up a level in life. And that's what we're all trying to do. Just take it up a level. You don't have to have a private jet and all that shit. For some people, that's what they love. You know, I love having a supercar. I love that thing. It's a nightmare and a dream at the same time. It's a pain in the ass, but it's also a pleasure. You know, I love having the supercar. But I've got friends of mine who buy supercars to prove to others how worthy that they are and that they've made it. And at the same time, when they get criticized and judged and told that they're a piece of shit and that they're a scammer and that they rip people off, they don't know how to deal with it because now they're showing off that they have more than others and they stand out. If you want to stand out, expect more criticism and judgment in order to balance you out. And if you're not ready to handle that, it will just take you back to where you deserve to be for your level of mental and emotional intelligence.
Hence why being authentically yourself is the best way, right?
Totally. You know, I've had people come to my events and they say things like, you swear too much. That's cool, don't come to my events. But I have people who come to my events as well and go, the only reason why I came to your events is because you swear, because you sound like someone who I get along with and someone who seems congruent. And I don't want to go to a rah-rah event. And I don't want to get all hyperactive and have someone tell me that life's going to be simple and easy and that I can sit on a beach and burn incense and life's going to be peaceful, because it's not. I mean, even the Dalai Lama, someone asked the Dalai Lama and they said, what's it like to be an enlightened human being? And he said, I'm not enlightened. I have points of enlightenment. Yet there's all these delusionists who run around talking about enlightenment and how they're all enlightened. It's a delusion and it's a fantasy that they've created in order to make themselves feel worthy and special. Every one of us has problems. We all have pain. We all have war and we all have chaos inside of our own head and inside of our own mind, and we will see it in the world because it gives us something to go and solve. It gives us problems. It gives us challenges to overcome. If we don't have any of those things, we have no reason to live and no reason to exist, and life becomes pointless. So we're all out in the world trying to figure out how to have some point in this thing that we call existence, which we need those things.
Mate, this one episode doesn't justify. I have written so many questions to ask you, and in all honesty, I think I've probably gotten through two or three. So I would absolutely love at some stage in future to have you back on the show.
I love it. If you've got time, I'm happy to keep going as long as you want to keep going. Like I'll go to the gym later on or something like that, but I don't actually have anything else planned today except a whole bunch of meetings, so I'm good for a while if you want to keep going.
Yeah, I will. I've got a few more questions, mate, because I definitely, you know, I've got, as I said, I've written so much down. But what's your legacy?
I don't know. It's a question that I consistently ask myself. What I know is that I focused on that question for a long time, and I think that it made me feel like shit because I was focusing more on what I was trying to do after I died instead of what I was doing while I was here.
Yeah.
You know, I think all of us want to be remembered, but what I did was there's a process that I created which helps you to balance out those perceptions and charges in your brain. It's called the process potential, and it's something that I think there's only probably one or two of us in the world that have actually ever created, that I've come across at the moment anyway. And what I did was I sat down and I looked at life and death. And what I realized is that even when I die, it doesn't really matter because every human being that's existed before me has left me with a legacy of the information that I now know. And whether it's in book format or whether it's just you as a human, like if you look at the biology of your cells and your genetics store information. And that's why I know that if you go back and you look at all different fields of sciences, information is the only thing that evolves. You know, humans evolve because of the information that's given from one generation to the next generation, and that information is in the form of DNA. Now, we have all of our past experiences and perceptions and distortions and delusions and all that stuff trapped in that DNA, and we give it to the next generation in order to solve more problems, and we solve a whole bunch of problems and we create a whole bunch of new ones, and that's called evolution. That's why, you know, I have people who come to my events and they say things like, you know, I just want to get rid of all my problems. Well, that's called death. And even death itself creates a problem. Part of the whole lesson of existence is that problems are needed in order to grow. So we solve one problem, we create a whole new problem. And when someone says, the good old days, all they're saying is, I would love to go back to the times that I forgot about all the problems that we had back then, but it seemed easier now that we've solved those problems. Because once you learn lessons, it's a lot easier to problem solve. And so what tends to happen, like if we look at the world now, we've got artificial intelligence, which is freaking out a lot of people, going and living on space. You've got the internet where we're all connected and we're all comparing ourselves to others and all that shit's going on. In 200 years, or even in 100 years, even in our lifetime, we'll probably look back and go, hey, remember that good old day of Facebook when, we used to use Facebook and connect with everyone in that way? We'll forget about all the problems that we had. We'll forget about all the chaos that it created because we only remember those, good things. Like I have people who come to my events and they say, oh yeah, but life would be so much easier if we just went back to the simple life. And I'm like, oh yeah, the point where everyone had like malaria and shit because mosquitoes used to bite us all the time and we didn't have fucking doors on our house and we didn't have windows. You mean like those good old days when we used to get a bacterial infection and die from it? Like those good old days? The good old days where we used to have to carry around gold in our pocket, which was so obvious and so heavy because we didn't have money and we didn't have credit cards or anything like that. You mean the good old days where we used to write a letter and put it in an envelope and send it and hope that it gets to where it's going to get to because we may or may not get a reply. And if we get a reply, it's going to take 2 months to get back to us. You mean those good old days or the good old day where we could jump on Facebook, send a message to someone and within like 1 second we get a message back? Or that I can sit on Skype now or Zoom and I can talk directly to you and that information is traveling at the speed of light, which means that in 1/114th of a second, that information goes from your side of the world back to my side of the world and we can communicate in almost real time. So like, what is the good old days? So coming back to legacy, I think that if you focus on things that you're not present for, like the future or the past, you can lose yourself from doing what you need to do in the moment. And I'm just trying to get myself to a place where I focus more on what's important right now than focusing on what happens. Like if I just keep doing what I'm doing, I'm sure there'll be a legacy. But if I focus on the legacy, I think that it stops me doing what I'm doing now because it's something that's big. And then it makes me feel like shit because I feel like I'm not achieving what that greatness is. So I just prefer to just do what I do now and whatever happens in the future.
So you didn't set a vision with a number, for example, something that's measurable. So you didn't say, Michael wants to inspire 1 billion people during his lifetime, or you focus on the activity in the present, like you said, and then you know that within your heart that'll eventually perpetuate and you'll reach that anyway.
Look, that's a really valuable question. I definitely have a mission. Part of my mission is that, I definitely want to be known as the number one high performance coach on the planet. And when I say high performance, I just want people I want to help people who want to kick ass in life. As I mentioned, I don't want rock kickers that just walk around kicking rocks for their life. I want people who want to do cool shit. They're the people that I want to work with, and they can be all different levels. From rock bottom right to super high achievers.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that on the back of my cupboard there that you can see it written up there.
Yeah.
And I only posted that there the other day just to remind myself because I felt I was getting into. I wasn't sure whether I was getting into a bit of a slump after the Christmas season where I said I got rid of that stress response. But it's just to remind me every day that if I want to be the world's number one high performance coach, I have to do the things that the world's high performance coach does, and that's be accountable to my own shit. I don't really focus on that and create the big vision and the dream, all that sort of stuff. It's just there as a reminder that if I'm going to be the world's number one high performance coach, I have to be thinking and behaving like it today in order to get there. So it's a reminder. The other thing that I would love to do is I would love to have 1 billion people on the planet use our products in some way, shape or form throughout my lifetime.
Awesome.
Now that's also a goal, and we've just really stepped up our marketing now to where I'm creating some massive campaigns now that are going out because we're at that level where we're starting to expand globally and not just sit at the Australian level that's sort of a little bit comfortable. So I would love to do that, but at the same time, I'm not the sort of guy who sits there every night in bed and envisions it and writes all these goals and all that stuff. I like to free flow a lot more. And, I've looked at patterns of really high achievers for a long, long time, and I've been studying this stuff. And what I've found is that everyone does it differently. I look at someone like, you get a Grant Cardone who, he talks about every day writing down his goals. Every morning he wakes up and writes down his goals, just to keep reminding himself and reinforcing it. Then you have a guy like Dr. Dre, who creates Beats by Dre, or is part owner of Beats by Dre, who sold that company, I think, for $3 billion with Jimmy Iovine and a whole bunch of other people who are involved in it, who's probably one of the greatest music producers in history, and also who's launched the careers of some of the biggest musicians in history as well. And you look at someone like that and you go, okay, so he's a high performer. And what he said in one of his interviews, he said that time pressure and structure is the destroyer of greatness. And he said, his quote, I think it was, that if something just doesn't feel right, I ain't fucking doing it. And so he's someone who free flows a lot more through life, and look at the greatness that he created. Wow. So you've got someone like Grant Cardone, who is more structured in his approach to life, and then someone like Dr. Dre, who is more free flowing in life. Now, does Grant Cardone have people who are more free flowing around him? Maybe. I'm not sure. I don't have the answer to that. But then also, does Dr. Dre have people who are more structured around him in order to create structure within his free flow? And I would say that the answer is yes. So then the question becomes, how do I work most effective in my life? And I'm definitely more of a free flower. I don't like too much structure, because structure, I feel like, confines me. But at the same time, if I don't have structure, I get out of control. So when I travel, my team give me an itinerary and say, here's your itinerary. But in there, they know that if I've got to be at an event at 10 a.m., don't book in like 6 a.m. wake up, go to the gym for an hour, go have breakfast at this time. I don't work like that. I rock up at 10 a.m. and finish at 6, and anything that happens in between there, go and do what you feel like. At my events, I don't structure my events really structured and rigid, because I don't work like that. That's why interviews like this, I actually prefer to do interviews like this. Like, I get heaps of people who ask me to do podcasts, and they go, I'll send through all your questions. When they send through the questions, I might have a 10-second look at them and delete them, because I couldn't care. What I care about is just ask a question, let's see what happens. That's how I like to roll. Yep. Because I think that something more exciting comes up like that, and I don't know where things are going to go. It keeps me excited. Yeah. I have this energy, because you ask me very valid questions that make me think, and I love thinking, and it makes me reflect on my own stuff, which then helps me to get clarity. That's how I like to live. So, I think everyone has a way that they like to work. Personally, I create a mission, and I have a purpose. So my purpose is to lead an extraordinary life so that I can inspire others to do the same thing. My mission is to create a university or a hub where high performers can go and learn, and to create greatness. That's my goal. That's my mission. Now, I've been asked, is that a physical university? And yes, I would love to have the smartest scientists in lots of different fields come together to work to figure out what are the best ways to perform in life, in the form of human behavior. Now, that involves cosmologists, quantum theorists, quantum people from the fields of quantum mechanics, through to neuroscientists, psychologists, doctors, a whole bunch of things, because I think that there's a massive gap there, and the paradigm's slowly starting to move in that direction. But there's also a lot of the scientists that I speak to are very cautious, because what they tell me and what they say in public are two different things, because they're afraid of losing, their position in the universities. Universities are also heavily funded by different companies. Obviously, definitely the health industry. If you just go to and have a look at the nutrition conventions, like the US Nutritionist Convention or Dietetics Association, when they have their annual convention, normally some of the biggest funders for those are McDonald's, Coca-Cola, who are the other ones? But if you have a look at that, you can't tell me that the Dietetics Association, if they're being heavily funded and they're getting millions or if not billions of dollars every year, that they're not going to publish. There's no fucking way in hell they're going to put out research that counteracts that food is bad. They're not going to do that. They're going to beat around the bush or create grey areas so that it's ambiguous, because they're afraid of losing funding. Universities are exactly the same. They get heavily funded by external influences. I don't really like that model, because I think that it holds science back. I get criticized sometimes because people say to me they're self-entitled. They go, well, you don't have a university degree. A university degree is just a current model of thinking that a group of people agree is a good model. it's nothing. It's nothing apart from that it's a good model that we teach people what that good model is. It's open for criticism. It's open for challenge, just like I'm open for challenge and criticism. But I think that the university systems have lost themselves a little bit about trying to find out what works and what doesn't work and what's true and not true because of the impact that financial funding has on their model. Now, that's a good thing. It's also a bad thing. Maybe it's a good thing because it injects a lot more money into science, but it's also a bad thing because they've got to be cautious around challenging companies or ideas that those companies are vested in. So my goal is to create enough wealth in a way where I can fund it and find a model where I can fund it, or that the university can fund itself without having the influence of that shit happen. I'm not sure how that's going to work yet. I don't know. I'm just on the journey to see what we can do. Mojo University is online and it's going to open by the end of the year. I was hoping that it would open.
Wow. Awesome. Yep.
And my goal is to work with the highest performers and the greatest thinkers on the planet to bring information that's freely available or available on the internet, whether it's through our products or our programs, that then help people live an extraordinary life. So that's sort of my mission. That could be my legacy, but who knows whether I get there or not, different story. And then I have goals, and those goals have timelines and so on, which again are in flux because they adapt and change.
Thanks, mate. I really appreciate it. I've got a couple of rapid fire questions and then 3 last questions.
Hey, cool.
Yep. So rapid fire questions. And the first one is, what's one thing that people can do to live a more fulfilled and happy life?
Figure out who you are as an individual. That's number one. So I think it was Plato and Aristotle, if I remember from their work, spoke about knowing thyself. I still think that that's true today. Unless you know who you are, you're going to be living someone else's life. And when you live someone else's life, you'll never be fulfilled. Because only you know what you're great at and only you know what you love. And the key is just figuring that out. That's our Thrive Time event right there, is know thyself. And it's building a roadmap for your personal life. It's not what I think, it's what you think and what you are. You've just got to break down all those barriers that have been reinforced from others with their ideas and their perceptions that we test. That's what we are, is we test their ideas to see if it works for us or not. And we need that. But then at the same time, don't let it define you. Figure out who you are. So I think knowing thyself is huge. And then to do what you love, then you just need to have the right tools and the right support mechanisms around you that challenge you. I talk at my events about how a lot of people confuse true friends with fantasy friends. And fantasy friends are friends who always support you, what you do. That's a fantasy friend. Because the animalistic instinct, remember, tries to avoid pain and moves towards pleasure. It's animal. Animals are a lower level of intelligence. Now, some people will debate that, but I haven't seen a horse wear a wristwatch and I haven't seen dogs drive cars. So humans are far more intelligent than any other animal on the planet. Hence why, in the scheme of things, we sit at the top of the nature hierarchy, because we have our brains have developed differently and we've had ways that we've evolved differently. However that happened, I don't know. But the level of intelligence is higher. So if we can transcend the animal instinct, it means that we don't try to avoid pain and move towards pleasure. We embrace both pain and pleasure and we move towards things that we love. And so we'll do things that are painful and pleasurable at the same time in order to do things that we love. Hence why having kids is the most craziest, ridiculous idea if you break it down on paper. But at the same time, if you love to have kids, it can be one of the greatest experiences of your life because they're both painful and pleasurable and they give you feedback almost instantaneously. And same as working with people, like in what I do. So, coming back to it, if you want to do what you love, you need to know yourself first, number one. Number two is that you have to break and transcend the delusion of an easy life, a simple life, that everything's going to be great when I get there. It just has to be like, what am I going to wake up today and do that I really love, but that has both sides? Okay, that's really what it comes down to. And then also, you have to crack the old patterns that have been created in your own mind, which we all have, including myself. And I've worked with some of the greatest thinkers on the planet, and they still have it, where you're heavily influenced by the ideas and the paradigms of others. I mean, you look at science, and a lot of people will buy into paradigms that don't work, yet they'll keep trying to make paradigms work because it's a paradigm that they think still works. And it's because they are subordinating to an idea of someone in the past that they think was great at what they did. They were great, but your greatness never comes from trying to be someone you're not. It comes from learning from them, appreciating them, respecting them, but realize they have just as many flaws as what you do, and then moving forward. And so I will allow myself to be influenced from others, question their influence, and then determine how it works for me and not. If I pedestal someone else's opinion and I think that they have all the answers, what can happen is it makes me feel shit, because at the same time I'm putting them up on a pedestal and I'm putting myself down. And you'll never do that. That's why, like, if you look on Instagram, if I go through Instagram and I follow a lot of bodybuilders and so on, I look at their body and I go, wow, they have a great body. But at the same time I go, wow, but I'm fat and ugly and horrible. Now I might still have minimal body fat, and my body is better than probably 99.9% of people on the planet. I will still feel like shit because there's one person who I admire, who I'm pedestaling, that I perceive that their life is better than mine, and I'll put myself down. So anytime you do that, and that was an example, by the way, but our brain will consistently do that. If you value the opinions and the ideas of others more than you value your own opinions and your own ideas, and you don't question those ideas and opinions, and you don't realize that there's just as many upsides as downsides, you will pedestal them and put yourself down, and that'll create chaos until you learn that they're just normal people. That's why also on Instagram, for instance, I'll give you an example. If you find the hottest person that you can on Instagram and you look at them, at first you look at them and you fantasize. You go, wow, look how hot they are. You know, they've got the perfect bum. You know, I'm a heterosexual male, so I'll go, you know, wow, look at the bum. They've got great boobs, amazing tan, beautiful face, perfect hair. Wow, look how great they are. I bet even they have the most perfect toes. You know, just you do weird shit at first. And your brain creates this fantasy or this delusion that they're perfect. Then after a while, you keep looking and you keep fantasizing. So for months, you might look at their posts, and after a while you go, shit, is one eyebrow raised more than the other eyebrow? Ah, I caught them. I knew that they weren't perfect. And after a while, you start to find faults with them. Yeah. And you start to find faults with them because you're actually bringing them back down to realize that they're just a human being who's doing what they value most in life. Like, some people have an amazing body because they value beauty and health as their highest value. But if you value family as your highest value, you're not going to have a body like they have at the same time as you're looking after your young family and you've got 3 kids and you're trying to be the best mother or the best father that you can be while maintaining a job, while you're trying to put food on the table for them. If you start fantasizing about having a body like that, you become mentally destructive because there's no way that you'll do both. That person who has an amazing body probably spends 5 or 6 hours a day just focusing on their beauty and their health, what they eat, how they eat it, measuring calories, going to the gym, getting tan, getting their hair done, all that stuff. They're probably broke. They probably have no money. They probably have no responsibilities. They probably don't have an intimate relationship at the same time because they're a fucking nightmare to go out with because they're so focused on their beauty and the way that they look. They don't want to spend any time in a relationship. They're so self-obsessed. Like, that's just a generalization. But if you look at it from the outside, you create a fantasy without realizing all the challenges that that person has. The same as when you see a young guy with a Ferrari and a Lamborghini and go, wow, you know, so successful as a business owner. What about when he's risked everything or she's risked everything to get to that point and they can't even sleep at night? They have anxiety and insomnia because they know that tomorrow they may wake up and lose everything that they've worked hard for. And they're working 15, 16, 17 hours a day, haven't had a holiday for 5 years, yet they got a Ferrari, and now you're fantasizing about the Ferrari and how great their life looks, but you're not seeing it for what it is. So you have to crack those fantasies, because while you have those fantasies in your head, you'll be driven by the fantasy and not by yourself and what you really love to do in life. So that's really how you get down to that.
Thanks, mate. The second one is, what's one thing people can do to live a more purposeful life?
Again, just get clear with yourself, because your purpose comes down from having a purpose. Yep. And it also comes down to having a mission. And it also comes down to having really clear values. Like, I personally know inside my head, your values are a filtration system. And human psychology has actually misinterpreted what values are. If you look at the idea of value, value comes from a study of economics. And also, when we look at our values, the most valuable that you can be in life comes down to your values and your prioritization system within your own head. So our values are physical, tangible things that we're trying to create in life in order to figure out where our value sits somewhere in life, in a society full of 7 billion people, or in a world full of 7 billion people that all have different value systems. So what we have to do is get super clear and congruent with those values, because that's where we're most valuable in society. And that's where we have the greatest ability to generate wealth, to have a great life, to have a great relationship. All of those things come down to our values. Yet in psychology, they've misinterpreted values as being social norms. And so a social norm is something like kindness. I've never, ever, after working with tens of thousands of people, ever met someone who goes, I want to wake up in the morning and be treated like shit. Okay, everyone wants to be treated kind. Yeah. Everyone wants people to be honorable. The question is, what does honorable mean? And that comes down to our values, the way that we filter them. So I feel kind when I don't feel kind when people give me things. Like when someone comes and gives me a present, it's okay, like it's cool and I appreciate it, but at the same time, it's not valuable to me. When someone comes to me and they allow me to do what we're doing now, I feel valued in this conversation. To me, this is more exciting in my life and more fulfilling than being given a present, because this is where my highest value is, and this is where I'm valued the most by society, and this is where I make the most amount of my money, which then allows me to go and live more of my highest values. So I reinvest my money back into my highest values, because if I can keep growing my values, I can keep growing my value, which means I keep making more money, which I keep reinvesting back into my values. That's a self-fulfilling life that expands. Most people work at a job that they hate, which they feel unfulfilled and undervalued in, which then means that they get paid money. Then because they feel undervalued, they have to go and spend the money in order to get rid of the value that they've created because they feel incongruent with that value. So they depreciate themselves, which means their life depreciates and so does their bank account.
Yeah.
So it's all about getting super congruent with who you are as a person. Everything's all about congruency with who you are as an individual. Know thyself. Greatest gift you ever give yourself.
That's absolutely awesome, mate. And last one of those rapid fire questions is, what's one thing people can do to live a regret-free life?
Look, the only reason why we have regret is because a person perceives that there are more drawbacks to a situation in their life than benefits. And I can tell you right now, there's no such thing. The only reason why a person has regret in their head is because in their head, they've tagged something as having a disadvantage without an advantage. And I can tell you right now, after working with tens of thousands of people who come to my events with heaps of regret, remorse, feel guilty, have a whole heap of resentment, that there are always benefits to drawbacks. So if anyone ever feels resentful or regretful about what the choices they've made, just go back and ask yourself this one simple question. What are all the benefits of that situation? Now, if you're completely irresponsible and you love it, and you love your irresponsibility and you get more benefits from feeling shit, then what will happen is your brain will kick in and it'll go, nah, fuck that, there's no benefits to that, and it will start playing games. When I work with people, my job as a coach is accountability, and to hold people accountable to their goals and what they've committed to and their commitments, right? I think way too many coaches in our industry let people get away with shit, which is why heaps of people come to my events and they go, oh, I've worked with a coach and the coach is fantastic, but that coach is supporting all your bad habits because they want to be seen as a nice person. That's not a good coach. A good coach says, you committed to me that you're going to lose weight and exercise more. Start fucking running. That's what a good coach does. I don't want to listen to your shit. I don't want you to tell me about your hard times. Start running. Get your ass on the treadmill. Okay? I don't want to hear your bull crap. You committed your goal to you first. You committed to me. I'm committed to you, which is why I'm holding you accountable. That's a great coach. But too many coaches are scared because they haven't done their own work and they're scared of being judged. They're scared of being criticized. Do you know I've been called a motherfucker, an asshole, a piece of shit, a prick, all of those things as a coach because I've held people accountable. Now, those same people that do that, some of them, probably 99% of them realize that I do it because I care about them more than they care about themselves.
Yep.
And them getting their goals and them feeling fulfilled in life is more important to me than it is to them, hence why I'm holding them accountable. Okay, I care about them more than they care about them. But at the same time, I'm not prepared to let them get away with feeling shit because they're letting themselves get away with stuff because that's part of their habitual patterns that they've created. That's not my job as a coach. That's crap. A good sports coach will push their players to the breaking point and then rebuild them back up. That's a great coach. And the great coach plays the game to win. That's how I play. That's a coach. That's a real coach. A fake friend is someone who tells you what you want to hear, not what you need to hear.
Yeah.
Okay. My friends will kick my ass. Like I had a friend only recently who said that I was stressing out about my finances and where we're at in the business. And he said, man, look, in all honesty, I thought that you were the guy who taught people to play the game to win. And I said, yeah, I am. And he goes, it doesn't sound like it. And I went, oh man, you know how bad that hurt? Now I could have turned around and called him an asshole, but in that moment, it was exactly what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why he's a real friend, because he tells me what helps me perform at my best, not what I want to hear. Yeah. And sometimes what we want to hear hurts more. In in the moment, but it saves us long term. So I think when we look at regret, you need to go back and be 100% honest with yourself and not let yourself play games. And sometimes it happens. It happens to me as well. Hence why I have coaches. I have my own coach in all different areas. I've got financial coaches. I've got business coaches. I have business mentors. I have health mentors. I have a relationship mentor. All of those things, because I don't know everything. And what I realized is that those who think they know everything are actually those who know the least. Those who are intelligent realize that there's more shit that they don't know than they do know. I'm a pretty intelligent guy when it comes to a lot of stuff in life, especially around human behavior, because I study a lot more than the average person.
Yeah.
But what I know is that the more that I study, the more that I don't know, which makes me feel actually really unintelligent. Now, to most people, they come up to me and they go, you're a really smart guy. But at the same time, I don't feel so smart. Hence why I keep studying, because I don't feel that smart. I have way more questions. Every book that I read brings up more questions than it does answers. So I'm just on the journey of keep finding those answers to the questions that I don't have. So, that's never going to stop. But I think that if you're 100% honest with yourself and you go back to exact moments in time where you have regret and ask yourself, what are the benefits? There are always benefits. And until you stack as many benefits as drawbacks in your own head, your brain won't click and neutralize that situation. It has to click. And when it clicks, I've watched people in our events, I call it a pop. And that's what our whole process of potential is based on. The one where I get people to balance out their brain or their beliefs and ideas. Actually, it balances everything. It can actually balance chemistry, physiology, biology. It creates new neural pathways. What I'm doing now is I'm starting to work with some scientists to put that data together to show all this stuff that happens. I know that it happens in theory because I've got all the research and the data to show how it all works, but I can't just go, bang, we've watched a person go through the process and this all happened at once. I haven't got that yet, but I know I've seen what happens. And we've had plenty of people who have had massive who have had hormonal imbalances, who don't have hormonal imbalances anymore after doing a few of those processes and balancing out neutralizing states. Now that we always have hormonal imbalances because it depends on what you call balance and what you don't call balance. But there's sort of some of them are really out of balance and so on. We've had plenty of people with mental and emotional disorders who come in and it can pretty much neutralize them, some instantly. Others, it takes going through the processes over time in order to balance it out a bit more. We've had a whole bunch of different things. But what I know is that if you go in and you neutralize it, sometimes you just get a big like almost a big release. Other times, I've sat there and watched people at our events cry and laugh for half an hour. And they'll be blank, like they'll blank out. You can almost walk past them and do this and they'll blank out. And the reason why that's happening is because all the situations and past experiences that they've built from those original perceptions all start to collapse and distort. So imagine if your whole life is based on a situation that happens when you're a child. Your whole life and all the actions that you've taken, everything, that's been a driver for you and an avoidance mechanism. And all of a sudden, all your now current beliefs, actions, inactions, behaviors, everything are all based off of that one initial incident. And you collapse that incident. It reorganizes all the neural networks in the brain that relate to that. And it creates a whole new perspective about life. When people say they can't change the past, that's crap. Because the only place that the past exists is in the neural networks within our brain. My past is different to your past based on my perceptions. So if I can change those perceptions, it creates new neural networks and the past, the idea of the past is changed.
Mate, thank you. I appreciate those. Thanks for the insights. I really appreciate it.
Sorry, mate, I've just got my out of control.
No, really powerful. You mentioned I'm gonna wrap up. I've got 3 last questions. I'll try and make them quick because I'm really grateful for your time and everything you said. I know in advance you're not going to like this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I've listened to some of your previous interviews. But behind you is a wealth of knowledge in the context of a book. And I feel that books are really powerful because you can almost condense, say, 5-10 years worth of knowledge in a book based on research, etc. Now, I know that Joe Dispenza's been influential in your life, Dr. John Demartini. If there's one book that you could put on that bookshelf for future generations to improve their life, I know you find this difficult to answer, but you've got to give me one book that that you and I could put into the future hands of generations to give them the best shot at life. What would it be?
I hate the question because it's a very idealistic question. Look, I can't give you an answer for that because I think the books give you. Do you know most of the books behind me and in my bookshelf are half unread? And the reason why is because I think books give you a great insight, and even podcasts like this or whatever, they'll give you an insight to where you're at any point in time. So when I started learning human behavior, Tony Robbins' stuff was very instrumental into where I am today because it gave me an insight. But before that, I was studying Paul Chek and his work. And sometimes I still go back to their work and just have a bit of a quick check. But what I found was I outgrew it. And that there were big gaps that I found in their work. And so I went out and I started studying more. And then I came across guys like Dr. Joe Dispenza and I studied a whole heap of his work. But then I found that there were gaps that didn't sort of help me to get to where I wanted to get to. And I think any great scientist or philosopher realizes that you solve one problem, you create another one. There's always going to be gaps. And Dr. John D. Martini always says, you've got to stand on the shoulder of giants. And I've got a bookshelf of giants behind me that I stand on the shoulders of. I take bits and pieces of everything that I know in order to try and figure out how I can take it to that next level. That's my job here on this earth. Now, there's probably going to be someone else as well. Like we've had kids as young as 12 come to my events, and actually we've had newborns come to the events and toddlers and things like that. But I think the youngest one that we've had who actually sat through the whole Thrive Time was a guy called Josh in Perth. He was 12 years of age, and a super smart kid. As in, he was so smart. In order to come to Thrive Time, he sat in one of my one-day events with his mum, and he said, "Mum, I'm going to Thrive Time." She said, "We don't have the." No, she said, "If you're going to Thrive Time, I'm not paying for it." So he used to buy broken scooters off of kids at the skate park, break them down into parts, put the parts that worked in his backpack, and when they'd break parts, he would resell them back to the other kids. And that's how he paid to come to Thrive Time. So super smart kid, probably great entrepreneur when he grows up. But that's how he came to Thrive Time. So, I think someone like that will probably stand on my shoulders one day and show that there's gaps in my work. But look, I think that really time is the great test of wisdom. And when I have a look at it, there's the books just here that you can probably see. They're all like the black books. There's a book. It's a series that I got from Encyclopedia Britannica. It cost me a good couple of grand to get those books. What they are is, I think they're called the great books, and they're of some of the greatest thinkers in history. You got guys like Aristotle, Charles Darwin, Plato, Shakespeare, all of those. Like a lot of my bookshelf now is full of those great thinkers. Einstein, Freud, Carl Jung. I think they're starting to show that they're standing the test of time. Like it's really easy to be, if you look at Instagram, it's really easy to be popular for a week or a month or 2 years or 5 years. But can you be popular in 100 or 200 years? And people are still debating Sigmund Freud's work, what he meant, all of that stuff. When you look at, I think it's Leibniz or Leibniz, works from those guys and girls and people like that, Madame Curie, all of those people, they've stood the test of time. Einstein's standing the test of time. I'm sure Hawking will expand the test of time because they're challenging the way that they're really paradigm shifters. They're asking questions that other people aren't asking. And so I really love studying philosophy, spirituality, science from the past, but also some of the greatest thinkers right now, right today, and some of the greatest philosophers today and now. So it all just depends. Like it depends on what I'm into in the moment. Like lately I've just been reading some great books of business because that's what I need. But then other times I'll go and I'll study like 2 months of just quantum theory and just immerse myself in it to the point of where I'm almost brain dead from studying that stuff so much. And then I'll go and study cosmology and how the universe works. So I can't really say. I think I'm just drawn towards great thinking. So, mate, if anything, I would recommend the Great Book series. But in order to read that stuff, you've got to be able to think and question and to do that stuff. Because if not, it's torture. And you'll read the first line and you'll put the book back. Some of the books actually, Emerson. I started reading some of Emerson's work. And I started reading like a page and a half, and I got into it. It took me like half a day to read Emerson's work in order to try and figure out what the hell he's talking about. And then I put it back and pick it up for like another 2 years because it was just too much. So it just depends where you're at on the scale. Like as I'm growing, I'm learning more and more stuff. But what I realize is that you always have to, whatever you're learning, you always have to be shit at it first. So just get really good at being shit, and eventually you realize that you're really good and you know a lot about it. Just don't have the expectation of knowing a lot first.
Awesome tip. Thanks, mate. All right, second last question. If everything, now you've created a lot of things, flick the switch program, confidence, etc.
Yep.
If everything that you've created to date was erased, and I gave you a piece of paper and a pen, and you had one thing that you could write to inspire future generations to believe in their inner greatness, what's the one tip that you would give them?
The tip.
The one thing that you would write down to inspire people to believe in themselves, in their greatness. Be yourself. Okay.
The greatest thinkers in history have all been saying it. It's just, most people choose to ignore it. Just be yourself. Figure out who you are, know thyself, and then be thyself. It's the greatest thing you'll ever do.
Thanks, mate. And the most important question I've got is, what's the best way that we can serve you?
Look, I don't know. I don't really like the word serve because it I guess it sort of means that I don't know. I'm making the assumption that maybe in order to serve me, you feel like you need to give me something back in return, or that you're less. Look, I think the greatest way that we can all serve each other is just to figure out whether our value systems align with each other, and if that's the case, then help each other to go to along our path. What I know about relationships is that all relationships have a start and a finish and a point in time, and some relationships last a lifetime and other relationships last 1 second or 1 minute. But if you hold on to those relationships for too long, you start destroying each other's life, whether that be a marriage or a friendship or working careers and all that sort of stuff. So it's important to know how to help each other at any point in time to help you to move on your path. And I'm a huge advocate of being selfish. And the reason why I am is because that if you look after yourself, then you've got a greater ability to look after others. You cannot be selfless without being selfish. The idea of being selfless is ridiculous, and it's immature, and it is irresponsible. And a lot of people who buy into that paradigm create a delusion where they say that they're giving to everyone else, but at exactly the same moment, they're creating expectations on everyone else that your job then is to look after others because they've looked after you. So when we create expectations that don't create a fair value exchange, all it does is it creates guilt and resentment. If I give you too much and you don't give me anything back in return, you'll feel like you need to give me something back, which will leave you feeling slightly guilty.
Yeah.
So guilt and resentment are byproducts of unfair value exchange. If you can figure out in your life how to create fair value exchange, it makes everything simple. So even my brother-in-law, who's a plumber, comes down and he'll come to our house and I'll ask him to do some plumbing work and he'll go, I'll do it for free. And I say, I don't want you to do it for free. If you don't value yourself, I'll get another plumber in who values themselves and I'll pay them. Because if I don't do that, what happens is he comes down, he does work at my house 5 times. Then him and my sister go to move house. And then I feel guilty because I don't really want to help them. I don't want to help them move house. I don't want to pack boxes. That's not what I'm born to do. It's not what I'm great at. It's not what I love to do. So I feel guilty and I feel a responsibility that I have to go and do it, because if I don't, then they're going to be pissed off because they've helped me out all this time. And so now I start to feel guilty. And if I say no, they're going to feel resentful and I feel guilty. So can you see how this whole idea of giving without receiving fucks people up? Like, it seriously fucks people up and it fucks up relationships. Whereas if I just go, dude, I'll pay you. Then what he can do is he can go, hey, I'm going to shift house. And I go, that's cool. I've got shit on the weekend. I prefer to study and I prefer to work, and I'm going traveling and I'm going to go hang out with Jess. And I just prefer to do my own thing. And you've been paid, so therefore you can pay for the removalist to go and remove your stuff, and they can help you out. And if I get some time, I'll come down, I'll give you a hand if I feel like it. But it's my choice then. I don't have guilt and resentment as a driver in order to drive me to go and want to help others, or that I feel frustrated. It gets rid of all that stuff. So I just prefer to lay everything out on the table. And I think that, the best way that people can help me is just to help themselves. Like, I say this to my community, if you really want to do the best by me, take what I've taught, go out there, kick ass, live the best life that you can do it, show other people how to do it, and let's get this show on the road. Because when I see someone else kicking ass, that inspires me. And when I'm inspired, I want to do it more. there's nothing worse than seeing people come to my events, leaving those events and falling back into old patterns, not reaching out for help, not asking me, and then turning around and 6 months later they go, well, fuck, I didn't get the results that I wanted. And I go, you didn't ask. You didn't ask for help again. You didn't do anything. And then also as well, you blame me because of your own irresponsibilities of not taking responsibility for your own life. And you've probably been doing that your whole life. They're not the people that I really want to help. I want to help people who go, you know what, Mojo taught me how to do this stuff. I'm going to go and give my greatest appreciation by implementing it and showing him how great I am because of what he taught me. That's how you can best serve me, man. Thanks,
mate. I probably wouldn't have had the courage to even initiate a podcast without Mojo's help. So everyone who's listening in, please go and attend Thrive Time and all of Michael's events. They are absolutely mind-blowing. If you think today's chat inspired you and shifted something in your belief, those events will completely change your life. So, mate, I just want to take a moment just to wrap up. Firstly, to acknowledge you as a person and a friend and a mentor who's been influential in my life. I am immensely honored and grateful that you've taken the time and given me so much of your time this morning. You've gotten up really early. The people that you serve, the commitment that you put to your craft, and more so the fears and insecurities that you yourself have to overcome on a daily basis to show up and to be a leader for other people. You really inspire me to become that type of person and to strive for greatness. So, mate, I just want to say a huge thanks. I am going to watch this episode over and over and over again because, you know, this is a lifelong learning just in one episode. So if there is an opportunity later on and there are some other things, some questions that come through, etc., if there is an opportunity to get you back on the show, mate, I would absolutely love it.
I'd love to. Mate, can I also just quickly mention as well, like if anyone's got any questions or what I really love is I love connecting with people who have that thing inside of them that just says, I want to be better. I know I can be better and I know I'm here for something so much more and I'm prepared to go and do something about it and I'm prepared to do what it takes in order to kick ass in life.
Yeah.
If that's the case, you know, I just love hearing from people. So normally when I do podcasts or if I do anything, jump over to my Facebook page. Can I give it a plug quickly?
Yeah, go for it. Let us know where they can hit you up online or follow you or, you know.
Yeah, so just the Mojo Master Coach on Facebook. Yep. On Instagram, it's, I think, Mojo_Master. So you'll find me on Instagram. So that's Mojo_Master. And on Facebook, it's the Mojo Master Coach, all one word. If you look that up, you can find me on there. And what I love is that if, you know, something that I've said here inspires you or, you know, tell me what you love about the podcast or whatever, because I love interacting and finding out what people enjoy so that when I talk about this sort of stuff, like I just want to give, in a way, I want to be able to help people, like something that we're really wary of, especially with my marketing team. Last year, I nailed my marketing team. I said, guys, you've got to stop producing and putting out shit that is the same generic crap that everyone else puts on Instagram and stuff like that. You know, like, you know, I see Instagram quotes all the time, like, you know, you can be the best, go and do it. Well, no one wakes up in the morning and says, I'm not going to go and do it and I don't feel the best and I want to make a shit life. So quotes like that don't mean anything to me. I think the greatest quotes that I have depth and substance. You know, like trees grow the deepest roots in the harshest droughts. If you think about that, it will put you into a state where you actually start to think about that. And what I want to do is just to give people information that they have to think about and that challenge them to just step up. So I like to get feedback from people who are listening to this sort of stuff or who are watching my videos or you know, even come to our events about what's working, what's not working, what they enjoyed. Because then I can start to tailor interviews and what I do to get better information, better quality of information out to people. So please jump on and say hi. And I had one interview that I did and I was saying about how much of a dickhead I am. And, you know, because someone said, like, what do people call you? And I said, I don't know, asshole, dickhead, all of that stuff. And so we're joking about it. And afterwards, it was for a network marketing company. And afterwards, I think I had about 15 messages. I've saved them all on my computer because I love reading through the testimonials when I'm going through hard times to remind myself of why I do what I do.
Yeah.
And I had all these messages come through where they signed it off like, and something like it was awesome anyway, chatting, you dickhead. And so that was the thing that they sent through. So I appreciate it, and I think I also really just love people just being genuine. Like, if you think that I'm an arsehole, just tell me that I'm an arsehole. Like, I think that that's what our society is missing at the moment.
Yeah.
Almost like what I see in the world is that there's this whole group of erratic people who just hate everybody and are frustrated with everybody and think that humans suck, even though they are human as well at the same time. So that doesn't make any sense unless they suck as well. But there's a whole bunch of angry and jaded people out there who just fly off the handle with things and don't really think about what they're doing or what they're saying. Then there's a whole bunch of other people out there who are walking on eggshells because they're afraid to upset someone, or they're afraid to say anything that's bad or that's wrong or anything like that. And so it's really created a really split society. Whereas I think what the world's lacking at the moment, especially on social media, is people who just say how it is.
Yeah.
Even if you say how it is and it's incongruent and it's a bit weird, what will happen is you'll get feedback from people around you anyway, and that feedback you'll have to question yourself to bring yourself back in balance. Like, there are some times where I've been super elated doing interviews, and afterwards people said, I didn't like your voice, you sounded like a dick, you sounded like you over-exaggerated things, and I was like, oh, maybe I did. And when I went back, I looked at it and I went, yeah, actually they were right. There was good feedback there to keep me back in balance. There's other times as well where I feel really down and really shit, and I seem to get all this support where people come in and go, look, you don't have to be like that, you changed my life. Last year I had a guy on social media attack me for like months. He was one of my biggest supporters, and he did some stupid shit, got himself in trouble financially, and because of his stuff, as I mentioned, my job as a coach is to keep people responsible. I always say, if you come to my events, my job is to make sure you get your results. So my job was to help him to get through those financial times. Now, instead of reaching out and telling me that he was going through shit, he hid it all. And then eventually my team were pressuring him, saying, you owe us all this money. Where's our money? Like, that's your responsibility. You committed to it. We delivered. You need to deliver now. That's fair value exchange. And then he went on social media and told me what a piece of shit I am, and how I'm driven by money, and how I fuck people for money and all that sort of stuff, and created all this chaos. Eventually I got to a point where I got on social media and I did a video that was called Get the Fuck Out of My Tribe. And what it was I was trying to get rid of people in my community, or in our community, who had snuck their way in, who weren't congruent. And we got a whole bunch of fluffy duffies who wanted like the world to be easy and everyone to look after each other and everyone to pat each other on the back and tell everyone how great it is. That ain't never going to happen. True friends are people who challenge you, not people who tell you that everything's going to be great. So I wanted to get rid of them. I had people in our community who had snuck through, who they would point out all my flaws. Now, I never hide my flaws. I have shitloads of them. Actually, I have more flaws than I do greatnesses. I've already spoken about that. But these people seem to think it was their job to point out all my flaws because they pedestaled me. They saw me as this godlike creature that had all my shit together at my events, pedestaled me for a while, and the only way that they could take me down off that pedestal was to criticize. And so all they did, every video that I posted, they just criticized. So I did this video about get the fuck out of my tribe, because for months I'd gone through all this inner turmoil about why these people were attacking me. When I did it, I got so much. It was our #1 most viral video. I got so much support from people sending me messages that I didn't even realize these people followed me. Old friends that I hadn't seen for 20 years, family members, all that stuff, like saying, you're on the right track. But what you realize is that feedback keeps you in balance. So please, I went on another tangent again for an hour, but anyway, I love that feedback and appreciate it. So I always appreciate feedback.
That's awesome, mate. We'll link all your socials in the show notes below.
Awesome.
So
this is going to turn into like a Joe Rogan podcast. It's going to be like a half-hour job.
Joe ain't got nothing on us, brother.
That's my goal one day, is to get on one of his. I'd love to get on there and have a bit of banter and a bit of a joke with that guy. I do enjoy his podcast.
Yeah, I haven't listened to much of his stuff, but I've heard good things about it. So let's try and get you on there.
Done. We need to get Mojo on Joe Rogan podcast hashtag.
That's our mission.
Campaign.
That's our new mission. Mate, thanks again, Michael. It's been awesome having you on, brother.
My pleasure, mate. Thanks very much for having me, and thanks for being a massive supporter of what we do, and also sharing what I do with the world. And thanks for everyone for listening in as well. And hopefully you made it through the podcast, because it's been long.
Cheers, guys. And you know what time it is. It's time to go out there and unleash your inner greatness.